Good evening, everyone. A few minutes behind here, but we'll get going. Emily wants to give a brief introduction about some software that the city is working on here.
Thank you, and appreciate you taking the time. We just wanted to share that we have a new meeting management software. So what's going to happen is community members will be able to view the video online along with the agenda and the meeting packets going forward. There'll be separated links like you see here. So it's just a little bit of a different look and feel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us in Planning Department. We're doing a soft launch of this today. And you'll see other boards and committees converting over to this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Excuse me. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Planning Board and valued community representatives, I welcome you all to this evening's assembly of the Saco Planning Board. As chairman, it is my privilege to convene this gathering dedicated to the thoughtful planning and development of our community. Today, we come together with a shared commitment to shaping the future of our city in a manner that reflects our values, respects our heritage, and fulfills the needs of our residents both now and in the future. Our agenda tonight contains important matters, each requiring our careful consideration, expertise, and collaboration. As we engage in our deliberations, let us remember the profound impact these decisions will have on all lives, keeping in mind we are residents like you. Together, we must embrace the responsibility entrusted to us by our community, working diligently and thoughtfully to chart a course that fosters growth, prosperity, and harmony. With that, I would like to call this meeting of the Saco Planning Board to order for Tuesday, June 18th, 2024. I look forward to the productive discussions and meaningful outcomes that lie ahead. Thank you. With us this evening, our vice chair is absent. However, we have to my left here, Jeff Brucho, Rob Biggs, and to my right, Carrie Lynn Lane, Jim Moyer, and Matt DiCiani. And with us this evening, our city staff members, our city planner, Emily Cole Prescott, our assistant planner, Shannon Chisholm, and our city councilor, Ward 5 liaison, Phil Hatch.
Chairman Provincial.
Yes.
Before we start, could I have a moment of the board's time?
Yes, sir.
For those of you in the audience who don't know me, my name is Rob Biggs, and I live at 334 Lincoln Street in Saco. When my family arrived in Saco in 2015, we were immediately welcomed and found a hometown that we love. And for the past 9 years, I've poured my life and everything I've got into the town as the executive director of Saco Main Street. Additionally, I've been a member or involved with the Economic Development Commission, the Historical Preservation Commission, this planning board, and several other committees and commissions. That said, I am tendering my resignation to the Saco Planning Board effective immediately. I've enjoyed my time and activities with the planning board. The individuals on this planning board do not take their appointments lightly and put a significant portion of their personal time and efforts into this process. This is not a paid position, nor, as we all certainly know, there's no money in it. These board members all deserve your utmost respect for all they do for this community. Thank you, board members Matt, Jim, Carrie Lynn, Joyce, and Jeff, for allowing me to work alongside you, your camaraderie, and your professionalism. I also want to thank the planning staff, Emily Cole Prescott, Lisa Harmon, Shannon Chisholm, and Demetria Pellegrino. Your efforts in the improvement of meetings, as exampled by this tonight, and the process within the planning department have not gone unnoticed by both myself, I'm sure the other board members, and the public. And to the public, stay involved, stay engaged, and show up. You do make a difference. Thank you for your indulgence of your time, and with that said, I will vacate my chair.
Thank you, Rob. We're sorry that you can't join us, but we wish you the best of luck in the future. With that, our next item on our agenda this evening is the approval of the May 28th, 2024 minutes. Any comments, questions, or edits from board members?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Carrie Lynn. Any additional discussion? Those in favor of approving the minutes as written and presented? Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Continuing along, our next item are the minutes of the June 4th meeting. Any comments, questions, or edits on those minutes?
I'll move to approve the June 4th, 2024 minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Carrie Lynn. Any additional discussion? Motion to approve the minutes as presented. Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. 5-0 in favor. Our next item on the agenda this evening is public comment. This is a new item recently that the board has put on their agenda. It's an opportunity for residents to come and speak before the board, to bring up any general planning comments. This is limited to general comments and not any project-specific comments. Project-specific comments will be taken up during those particular agenda items. So with that, if there are any members of the public here with us this evening that would like to have some discussion, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. All right, not seeing any participants, will continue with our agenda this evening. Moving on, we have item 5A, and this is our planning board public hearing guidelines. Is there anything with this item that you'd like to address, Emily?
No, thank you. We just included them because they're usually attached at the bottom of the agenda.
Okay, just making sure with the new format here. All right, thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda this evening is item 5B. This is for 438 Main Street, map 40, lot 29. And this is the Thornton Academy Athletic Facility proposal presented by Teradyne Consultants. This evening is a public hearing and a continued application review for a site plan amendment for a proposed 53,280 square foot athletic facility in the medium density residential zoning district along with the historic preservation district. Anything to add, Emily, to this item?
The only items I'll add is in the after-the-fact packet materials in front of you tonight. We do have an email from Don Boucher regarding this project, just so you're aware of it during the public hearing. And we did receive Diane Morabito's final traffic impact review, which we've provided to you as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Emily. And with that, the applicant is here this evening, I believe. If
Aye.
there's anything to add or a brief presentation.
I don't have anything to add. Last time when we came for the thoroughness review, it was mentioned about rendering, so we put that up here. I can hand it to you if you guys can't see it. It's probably pretty small for you folks over there. Hold on. So I don't have much to add. I think I appreciate what you said at the beginning of the meeting, Matt, and I think this is a rare example of a project that really does help the community because it's going to be used by all the students in Saco, and it's I think a great addition to the campus. overall. So I know we addressed a lot of the questions by email, so we appreciate the opportunity to do that ahead of time. But anything we can answer specifically now, we did make a couple changes based on those comments. We changed some trees, added some, redid the lighting plan, moved some lights, added some plantings, et cetera, to try to address some of the concerns. We did provide additional parking information to address some of those concerns. And I know Matthew Cook is here today. He is the Director of Facilities at Thornton Academy, and he has a very detailed plan that they've been working on for parking, particularly during construction. So we've thought through that as well to make sure that the contractors have a place to park that's away from students, et cetera, and there's some overflow areas that we could use temporarily to address any of those shortcomings. The hope with this project is to try to get in the ground as soon as possible. The building construction type is pre-engineered. It's a pre-engineered metal building with the brick put on when it gets to the site, but the hope is to be able to get it up, minimize the impact, try to get as much done on the summer when there's no students so we don't impact the student population.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this time, board members? So as a reminder, this evening, this is a public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I move to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Jeff, for the motion.
Second.
Second by Jim. Any additional discussion? Motion made to open the public hearing. Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. The public hearing is open on this agenda item. Any members of the public or anyone wishing to speak on this agenda item, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Planning Board members,
Good evening.
Mr. Chair, city staff. My name is Jennifer Day, and my address is 49 Rosewood Drive. I come this evening also wearing the hat as the Director of Development for Thornton Academy. What I would like to share with you all that you may not see through the renderings and the proposal that's been put before you is, although there aren't people in all of the chairs in the room, over the course of the 7 years of this project, since it first became proposed and went into commitment to fundraise, there have been more than 420 donors who have put forth their vote financially for this project. The field house is 100% privately funded, yet will benefit the greater community through the educational service, but also the potential for the partnerships that we have with the city of Saco. We currently serve as the voting site for the city of Saco in Linnell Gymnasium. This field house would continue in that capacity, but with a much more accessible and available space. We also partner with Saco Main Street to host some of their events on campus, and this would allow, again, for more accessibility but greater opportunity. Additionally, age-friendly Saco will have the opportunity to utilize the mezzanine track that has been value engineered into the upper level of the field house. So those are just a few examples of how this property will not only just benefit the students of Saco and the surrounding communities that attend there, but also become an asset to the community in a greater capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
seeing no further public comment or public participation, I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff.
Second.
Second by Jim, thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion? Those in favor of closing the public hearing? Matt?
Yes. Excuse me, yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Back to board members. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? I know we talked about some traffic items at our last discussion. With us this evening is the peer reviewer, Diane Morabito. She's available for any questions if we would like.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm sure you could certainly ask Diane, but she really is here and prepared for Park North. But just so you know.
Being efficient. Taking advantage. Jeff?
I'll fill some space. I just happened to notice on this conceptual plan, particularly the top left, for our exterior lighting design, are those like upward-facing wall wash fixtures, basically at 2 tiers? And how? Yes. And how did you feel that that met the City Ordinance 230-604 for exterior lighting being full cutoff?
Sorry, can you come up to the board so we catch it on the audio? Thank you. Or the podium, excuse
I
me.
usually talk pretty loud anyway, but I'd have to look at the specification at light to be sure. I think it was meant not for general illumination, but just simply kind of an architectural feature of the building.
Yeah, correct. And I just wanted to, because it's very specific about what we're supposed to be evaluating on and 100%
Understood.
cutoff in dark sky. And the facility's been very compliant with the athletic fields and parking lots that they've done in the past. And not that I disagree that it's an aesthetic feature, but
Right.
if we were to be questioned later on, I was just wondering where it felt. The only thing I could see was if it was under a particular lumen level for accent lighting. So maybe,
Go ahead, sorry.
maybe just a little further into the process, if we had a little more detail on what specifically the
Sure
intent
thing.
was.
I'd be happy to provide that, and if they don't meet, we would absolutely get rid of them. I like my architecture, but only to a certain point.
My other question, just reviewing the packet, I thought it was pretty helpful. They had a pretty extensive revegetation plan that was very extensive, and I liked how the notes were incorporating it into the curriculum to be used. Remember in my days there, sometimes what was reflected on some of the historic places. And I think it's very unique that they're very conscientious of our green space. We talk about our green urban spaces, and we've looked at other site plans that are trying to squeeze so much out of their particular parcels. I had to commend that I thought that they were doing a really good job with some of the replanting. And that's always a tough one. It's so subjective to us as board members, but it's very clear that they are being diligent in that standard. And with regards to some of the traffic concerns in my evaluation and review, there's not a lot that's changing on campus. They're not really increasing student numbers. They're making a facility to be more functional. So I didn't really see a whole impact on the traffic piece. The one thing I wanted a little bit more detail on was just maybe the back side of the building. I don't know, maybe if I missed it in the site plans. Is there still going to be the common theme of interconnectability with paved walkways from the back side in the event that there needs to be some emergency exiting or transitioning on campus, heaven forbid? Is it going to continue to have that sort of interconnectability that the other buildings have had historically in the past with paved walkways so that there are multiple exits on like all sides of the building?
Yeah, there aren't any paved exits on the rear of the building. There's a significant stormwater retention area back there. It is traversable by foot, so there will be space for spectators to watch a baseball game between this building and the baseball field. But as far as a paved walkway, we are actually improving that overall. Right now, there's kind of a disconnect if you were coming from the main campus to go to, say, the dorms or the athletic center. So this building kind of ties all that together, but specifically on the side facing the science building and the side facing Route 1. So that's the main path of travel. There will be some additional foot traffic across grass as there is now for visitors to walk all the way around to get to the other side of the bleachers. But then we're actually doubling the access to the home bleachers with the existing entrance and the new option to walk by what's now, there used to be a bunch of trailers back there, storage trailers.
So, yeah, I understand you guys are walking that line with creating impervious surfaces and having to treat it. And I assume that there's been reflection. We've seen, the police department's evaluation reports, and I'm sure your staff are always thinking of these safety scenarios. And just in the wintertime, if there were to be pathways, it is another option for egress.
Yeah, right now our egress is, there's 2 points of egress at the back, but they don't come out the back wall, they come out the sides. And so there's connectivity through paved walkways to those access points, but the back side is predominantly gravel to satisfy the stormwater requirement.
That's all I had currently, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions or thoughts from board members?
Chair, I know one of the questions Jeff asked during one of the earlier meetings was the fire truck access around the building, and I think the TA was trying to do away with raised curbings to make it easier for bigger vehicles to move around the building.
Correct.
And have you had to change that at all since some of the earlier plans we've seen, or the city seems satisfied now?
No, we have not. We could have done a little bit better job on the drawings to illustrate. Those were just painted, so the curbs are actually painted. However, if we were to assume that those curbs were raised, we reviewed the turning radii with the fire chief and the apparatus, and they were content, but the curbs are actually painted. So so they have more room than they actually need, because if they go over a curb, there's no curb there, it's just paint.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts from board members? One item that I wanted to ask about, it's caught my attention. I know the design reviews by the Historic Preservation Board, but can you talk about the precedent for the vertical standing seam siding, or not the standing seam, but the vertical corrugated metal siding?
So a precedent from a campus standpoint?
Well, from my understanding with the Historic Preservation Design Review, with the compatibility of other buildings in the district, I'm just wondering why vertical metal siding. There's a lot of.
So
the only place to reference is the U-Haul next door, and I don't think.
I promise we won't put a U-Haul sign on it,
that's good.
Yeah, or a Penske sign. But so the vertical siding, it's one of the standard finishes for the prefabricated metal building. Obviously, we have to the campus side, we have shot put happening. We have the baseball field, so we're conscious about potential damage and how that's going to react. There is metal a substantial amount of metal straight across the parking lot on the Science Building. There's kind of that metallic siding. Obviously, this is not matching it, but it's the same family, if you will, the same material. And it's, we made a conscious effort. We didn't want the big box store. We didn't want U-Haul. So we added that brick at a sizable expense, but they let me be an architect. So we have the brick to really kind of tie it together. So it's, a big thing that the historic group had wanted to make sure is that we weren't matching the campus, right? So that drawing that you saw before that with all the brick, that was kind of to talk about why we chose the brick we did, but we didn't match the brick, but we wanted something that kind of was the same family. We kind of pulled some of the families of details from the other buildings, but we weren't looking to just match a building on campus. And so really it's kind of a blank slate with regard to that siding.
Are there any other areas within the building and the facade to reduce that mass and help it not feel like a Costco or a Sam Club? That's my
Well, that hurts my
concern.
That hurts my feelings. But yeah,
I know
so,
I had to.
So no, I think that again, that's why I did this drawing down at the bottom, right? Because from Route 1, the predominantly what you're going to see is the brick facade. We added planting. One of the feedbacks was, hey, can you make those trees a little bit taller? So to kind of soften that edge, and we did that. And again, where we considered doing more plantings on other sides of the buildings, but given stormwater treatment and parking requirements, trying to minimize impervious surfaces, we took the opportunities that we could to do that. But I think, it's I guess it's a personal taste thing. I think it'll look great. Honestly, I don't think I can understand your fear, if you get too much of that metal. But between this project and then the subsequent tree planting effort that Thornton Academy is taking separate from this, which is planting an additional 24 trees on campus, I think that, I hope that when you see it, when it's completed, you say, okay, I see what he was doing.
It's a lot of metal.
It is.
It's a lot of metal.
But you don't
any opportunity for some glazing in there to get some light up in there, maybe up in that mezzanine, that indoor track area, or anything?
So we do have a
The
substantial
only
amount
lights
of.
just in the front.
Yeah, we do have a
Glazing in the
substantial amount of glazing on the front, and the concern, of course, is, as we add glazing, we have, once we get to the back of the building, we have basketball in there, football in there, baseball in there, lacrosse in there, and as well behaved as all the children are at Thornton Academy, windows tend to be expensive to replace, so it's hard to introduce glass into that. Even on the mezzanine level, it's not separated. There's just a railing, so you still have that risk. And on the back side, remember that you have a netting on the baseball diamond. So the view from the back is going to be broken up by that netting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or thoughts from board members? So as a reminder, this evening we've completed the public hearing portion of this item. This is before the board for a site plan amendment. It's not a preliminary subdivision and final subdivision type of process. It's a site plan amendment. Any questions from board members for Emily?
Mr. Chair, I'll assume that for our next meeting, the planning staff will help us with findings of fact and conditions and so forth?
Yes, and I think the city engineer was reviewing the last comment response as well, so we would report anything out from that. But yes, we would provide you findings. Are there any conditions that, other than standard conditions, that you'd like me to be aware of? And Joe's conditions?
I think we'll make sure the light meets.
Yeah, I appreciate the architectural feature lighting. Unfortunately, the ordinance doesn't really allow anything like that, so if they were just downlights without the uplight component,
Our renderers
that would
do
be
take
okay.
artistic license sometimes too, so.
They do. They can get you in trouble too.
Yeah. I'll give them a call.
Jeff?
I'm kind of lost the packet. I'm having a hard time reloading the previous version, but when I look at the frontal conceptual concept, I mean, for me, you know, listening or reading the criteria that the historic preservation was looking at for the buildings to kind of be the same but not identical, and I think they really kind of achieved that. And in my mind, these two metal uprights the metal upright is kind of like a frame of the brickwork. So we're keeping a lot of that theme, and we're not just plopping a large commercial box store in the middle of it. And particularly with the trees, the vegetation, I think it softened it a little bit in my mind. And I know we always vary a little bit on our opinions of the design features, but I felt like it was framed fairly well, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I think, not to dwell on it, but there's, it being a campus, I really see every building out there as having a significant, prominent facade. That's my concern. It's not really, so you get to the IA building, or the old IA building, the new middle school building, that you start to read some back of some of the buildings, but a lot of the buildings don't really read that they have a back. So that was just my concern, that it's going to feel like there's the front and then everything else is the back. That's all. It's a large building. There's a lot to it.
I may be able to convince the owners to like paint a logo on one of the walls, which could be a nice addition.
That could be a good student project, maybe a mural of some sort. I mean, we do all that metal siding, the rest of the bulk, having it be recessive and quiet, I get that. There's just a lot of building, that's all. That's all. So I guess to answer your question, Emily, as far as conditions, I don't have any on my list particularly to add beyond the standard conditions. We talked about the lighting, and I think we have a general statement that says all cut off, no uplighting. So I don't think anything specific there. I mean, it's just a rendering. Those lights haven't been part of the package. They just show up on a rendering. It's just a question, so. Any other board member thoughts? So with that, Emily.
I'd just like to get some clarification on that. There was a comment made about usage, like this not going to increase usage based on, there's not going to be more traffic based on the events that are going to occur at this site, at this location.
Mm-hmm.
But then I heard something where we're talking about using it more in the community, letting the community use the space. So wouldn't we be increasing the number of events? If the community is using the space along with the school, wouldn't we be having more events at the space than normal? Which would increase demand for parking.
Understood.
That's where I'm going with this, so.
Yeah, my understanding of that, and I could probably pull someone else up to talk about, is that it's something that's been discussed and it hasn't been finalized. I know they've been floating things around, like, you know, early in the morning, because they're not going to mix the students and the public, right? Or perhaps weekends. You know, it's going to be something that needs to get worked out between them and the town, and I think when we look at all the other restrictions, if you will, with combining the public with students and safety and et cetera, that the traffic would not overlap.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Matt. So, Emily, we will work on providing findings of fact and conditions of approval. So it's up to the board how we'd like to proceed. We can table discussion and to our next meeting. We've done that in the past. Or if the board would wish, we can make a motion on this item and then review findings and conditions at our next meeting as well. It's up to the board to determine.
I'm happy to make a recommendation.
So, Mr. Chair, it sounds like you're looking for either a motion to approve or a motion to continue to the next meeting, so we could approve, if we're going to at that point, with findings of fact and conditions of approval, right?
Yes.
So, I think it makes sense to continue this until we have findings of fact and conditions of approval all together. So I would move to continue this to our next meeting, Emily, whenever that is.
It's July 2nd.
July 2nd? Move to continue to July 2nd?
And that's a formal motion.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim.
I'll second.
Second by Jeff. So we have a motion made and second to continue further review of this application until we have findings of fact, conditions of approval to review based on our discussions this evening, and the opportunity for city staff and city engineer to complete their review and provide any additional comments, conditions, or findings for the board's review. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. 5-0 in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next item on this evening's agenda is item 5C. This is for Waterfall Drive, map 63, lot 6. This is a 90-unit multifamily project presented by Sebago Technics. And this evening, we have a continued public hearing and a continued application review for site plan. This would be for a newly constructed, or excuse me, a newly created lot number 27, and 8 buildings with 90 residential housing units in the Park North contract zone in the Portland Road District. And this is a continuation from our May 28th meeting. Anything additional to add to this item, Emily?
We have Diane Morabito, our traffic peer reviewer here. I know there were questions about the Park North TMP. I believe that Brad Lyon is here for the applicant's purposes as well, for their traffic engineer questions. So you can have questions to both sides if needed. And the information we received is in the meeting packet. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions from board members for Emily? Well, if we could, let's start with you, Diane. I'm sure as Emily has mentioned, the board's just looking for some clarity and some further understanding as to the overall big picture of the TMP for this area of the site. Not to get too ingrained with the details, but just maybe overall big picture of.
So when DOT issues a TMP, there are two things we look at. One is you're tracking your trips to make sure you stay within your allowable, although technically you're allowed to go 100 over. And the reason for that is it's much like a project that is generating less than 100 trips that does not require a TMP. So if you've obtained a TMP, you only need to get a modification and go back for a new one when you go over the permitted trips by 100 or more.
Okay, can I ask a question real quick?
Yep.
So when you say 100, that's 100 trips, not 100% of whatever trip.
100 trips, correct.
100 trips.
100 peak hour trips in any of the peak hour periods.
Okay, and once you exceed that 100, that's when you need.
To go back to DOT.
Okay,
The other thing that we track besides the number of trips is the mitigation. So as you go along, in a project like Park North, there's mitigation at several points, and you have to track to make sure that you're also completing your mitigation that was required, because both the trips and the mitigation have to be completed in order for that TMP to stay valid.
so what's the relationship between the mitigation steps being complete and the 100 trips? Is there any?
No, in this case, there were different levels of occupancy that required things like traffic signal monitoring counts at like 25% occupancy, 50% occupancy, 75% occupancy. So there's several different conditions for different portions of the park, and each one of those conditions needs to be complied with. In this case, we've been tracking it, and it has been. You know,
Okay.
right now, this summer, they're scheduled to do the 50% counts. And then if they're not warranted, then if a traffic signal is not warranted, when they get to 75% occupancy, they'll need to do them again.
Okay, and I believe the applicant confirmed, and I think that's soon, in a couple weeks here, so.
Yes, the 50% is scheduled for this summer sometime.
And do we know what capacity we're at now? I know where it's a 50% study, but are we at 65% or 70%? Do we know?
I know we're over 50% occupied, because the
But
counts,
not at 75% yet.
not at 75 yet, but the
So
apartments
somewhere
or either the Aroma Joe's or the apartments will throw us into the 75%, I believe. So,
Once those are complete and occupied.
correct, once they're occupied.
So with the, let's say it's the apartment, for example, is it once the apartment is 100% leased? Or is that once there's a complete certificate? of
Generally, they've been
occupancy?
going by completion.
Completion, okay.
And just, I mean, we've been keeping a scorecard of where they are in terms of trips. And I've reviewed that, Sebago's prepared it, I've reviewed it, checked it against ITE data, and we're in concurrence as where they are right now. So if you want to look at that, we can real quick as to where they're at.
Sure, does Emily have that to display, or is that something you want to hand out?
So this includes.
Oh, this is,
It's in the after the fact
Okay, thank you.
packet.
Yeah, it's the scorecard.
okay,
And this includes the apartment units that we're talking about. It also includes the Aroma Joe's. So with all of those projects that are basically under construction or permitted, in AM trips, they are at 496. No, they're permitted for 496, and they are actually going to be at 533. So they are over. They're basically at 107% in the AM peak hour. The PM peak hour, they were permitted for 492, and they only have 407, so there's some excess trips in the PM peak hour, and during the Saturday peak hour, there's only 32 trips left until a new TMP is required.
okay.
So basically, the next major project in Park North is going to require a new TMP. Although it's my understanding that they've applied for reconsideration with DOT not to consider Aroma Joe's. So that could change, but we don't know that outcome.
And then the remaining items here, those are just general items that were part of the TMP. The 75,000, 5,000, 5,000, those offices, for example, specialty retail, restaurant, fitness, all those other items that have no status, those were just an
Yeah, I
item
think
to carry
proposed from the
for the,
original TMP.
for the TMP.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, okay,
and they could change, I'm sure.
sure.
That's why they're tracking the trips of those things that have been approved and occupied.
Sure. So in theory, the TMP was, well, you need to start
TMP
somewhere.
Yes, a TMP, especially for mixed-use development, you're really just permitting a certain number of trips, and you don't know how those mixed uses are going to play out
Sure.
exactly. You know, one apartment building may be bigger than originally envisioned. One building that you thought might be an office building might be a medical office building with more trips. So when you get a TMP, what you're really getting is a permit for a certain number of trips. And those uses, especially in a mixed-use major project like this, change.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help?
It does, it helps. Yeah, Jim?
Diane, I have a question that's probably based upon my complete inexperience with these. But on this sheet, there's a mention of a $5,000 square foot fitness facility. Is that the one that's already there on site, that Evolution Fitness? And if so, why would that not, should that be counted or towards the TMP? Or is this like a different facility they were thinking would go into the general project?
That's a good question. I'm going to refer it to Brad. Has he prepared the scorecard?
Good evening, members of the board. Specifically pertaining to, I just want to make sure that I'm clear what you're asking. The 5,000 square foot fitness facility, which I believe is listed as map 64, lot 3. Is that, that's the question?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's my question, yes.
Yeah, so that's just development that was listed in our TMP. That is not the fitness center that's on the corner of Cascade and Route 1. So that's future development. So again, this scorecard is a mix of what we accounted for at the time when the TMP was issued back in 2020. We have to make a number of assumptions on all of these lots for development. And then as development occurs, that's what's being tracked under the status column, so the third column from the left. So again, the 5,000 square foot fitness facility, which is the second row from the bottom, that's just planned development, likely will change, and that's just tracking against the permit. So that's not the same gym that was on the corner of Cascade and Route 1. Those were what we call grandfathered trips, so when we applied for the TMP, those trips are already accounted for. Does that answer the question?
It does, exactly, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
And that would be for the other, the Redemption Center building as well then?
Yeah, that condition applies to any of these rows in the scorecard that don't have a status update. So like, if you work from the top, a little hard to describe here, but like the 7,500 square foot office space, map 63, lot 6, again, no development there, 5,000 square foot of office space, no development there. So we're just corresponding those map lot numbers as it was shown in our TMP application and then updating that once those lots actually get developed, whether land use changes, the size of the land use changes, things of that nature. So yeah, anything that you don't see where there's no status update, that means there's no development on that lot as it pertains to the TMP. So the idea would be as development occurs on these future lots, we would update this scorecard and track it against our permit threshold.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff?
So, Diane, I think I have it pretty clear, but it sounds like in layman's terms, when they have a concept for a large development like this and they have to file for a TMP, they kind of create a best guess wish list. They make a hypothetical development, types of buildings they're going to put in. You use your addition of trip generation charts and kind of throw it all together and say, okay, this is the number of trips that we're going to apply for a permit. DOT reviews that, issues the permit, may have stages of what improvements they will need to make at different trip points or once they reach those. And as we build out, we keep changing, hence the reason that we have the 25, the 50, the 75% build out traffic counts, right? We're kind of monitoring where they are and when the improvements will be in play. And I guess I had misinterpreted some of the peer reviews because we're getting, reviewing applications one at a time, and there was all this talk about Ziggy's, and Ziggy's was going to push them over the 50% count. They had to do the 50% count, and then we were talking about Aroma Joe's, and Aroma Joe's had a lot, and then the permit holder was like, well, they might be taking some of our volume. So I think I understood you very clearly that you have now taken into account everything that's currently built out and everything that's been approved, including the Aroma Joe's, and that's what this scorecard, in your opinion, this scorecard, you agree, represents with the applicant, that this is the counts that we're at. So we are almost at the end of their permit capacity, even though they're showing 5, 6 lots that haven't been developed yet, right?
Exactly.
And so then it'll be the burden at that point for somebody to go and reapply or modify a new permit.
Correct.
So our review tonight for the 90 units is counted into that
It's in here.
permit, and we don't have to really worry about counts, right?
Correct. You are
So
still,
that magic cookie jar of number of counts that they have, there's enough cookies in there to finish this project.
yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
And you understood that very well.
So Diane, I have another question, but maybe for Brad as well. So Jim brought up a good point. So we have the fitness building. We have is it the beach beverage redemption currently now in there? And then the old ropes course that was out there.
Now, I'm assuming those were all there in the original TMP. This is the second TMP that was issued. So there was an original TMP issued previously that some of those other developments were built under, and this most recent TMP was to go forward from that point forward. So some of those existing things, like the rope course and Evolution Fitness, were there when this TMP was issued, and they were developed under the original TMP.
So when the traffic counts are done currently, all those, they're in addition to
They're
these.
not in addition to, they were already there. As Brad said, they were grandfathered because they were already previously permitted. So this permit started forward in,
So does the traffic for those,
August of 2020. So everything that was developed before August of 2020 was under the original permit. So we're only looking at things that have been built since August of 2020 on this scorecard.
so how do the traffic count and calculations, how is it determined that they're specific to these and nothing that's been built already? How does that calculation? So when the 50%, we're going to do the 50% calc here soon.
Oh, those calculations are based upon the ITE numbers. They're not based upon actual traffic counts. They are based upon the 50% occupancy level is determined based upon the scorecard, not based upon physical counts. But yes, they have to go out and do counts, and if there's already other stuff there that was known to be there when those levels were developed under the second TMP. It is confusing.
It's confusing.
You don't do it every day, I'm sure. Yeah. The occupancy levels are based upon the current TMP and this scorecard for when the mitigation of the second TMP is required.
So this TMP is good for, what do we say, the AM, let's say AM for just right now, 496.
Plus
peak
100,
trips.
so 596.
Sure. And that's exclusive of all of the trips for the previous TMP.
Correct, that were already developed at the time that this one was issued.
So I don't know what that number is, but that, for easy math, that could be
Oh, no,
a
it doesn't,
similar
it doesn't,
number,
those
right?
were already there, they're not part of this. Those trips were there, they were permitted previously under the original TMP, and they were grandfathered as far as this TMP is concerned. So we're only tracking things that have happened since this TMP was issued.
So every time there's a new TMP, you could 500 trips and 500 trips and 500 trips and just keep building stuff, but only look at 500 trips at a time.
You could, or somebody could get a TMP for 1,000 trips, or somebody could get a TMP for
So
whatever they choose.
So how is traffic actually controlled and mitigated if you keep adding 500 at a time, you only look
It's
at
reevaluated, and there's a new traffic study done that determines what mitigation needs to be done. So a traffic study was done in 2020 when they got their new TMP. It evaluated everything that was out there then, existing conditions, and then it looked at the impact of these additional 496 AM trips, adding 482 PM trips, and adding 357 Saturday trips. And that's how the mitigation was determined, what improvements needed to be made to accommodate these additional trips, over and above the trips that were there,
over and above the trips that are already there.
that were already there in 2020.
How do we, and someone's keeping track of all of the already trips?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
and then the applicant clearly can add to this, but I sat in on a lot of these meetings because I was here before I went to Water Resource when we redid this. I left for Water Resource probably the week the TMP was issued. And we looked at, the DOT looked at all of these things as background, like what was already developed, what had left to be developed. Some of this was already under construction, so the city said you have to only get 20 COs at one point to account for the additional traffic mitigation that has to be done. And then there were timelines put on when that mitigation has to be done, when it has to be done through that permit. And so you wound up with more mitigation than just the original 2008 permit because you added more trips. So it is accounted for. It's not just, oh, we're forgetting about those 500 extra
Everything
trips.
was totally reanalyzed at that point, and a whole new study.
Maybe out of turn, but it seems like with all the traffic problems we have, it seems like the numbers keep getting forgotten. That's why that it seems odd. That's why I'm asking about it, because it just seems like we're looking at the 596 potential that we have now added to a number that there is in the past, that there was, that's all. It's Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm having a hard time following, and I'll try a question in a different way. So TMP-A that was done originally for the ropes course and the Redemption Center was out there and it's been built out and satisfied. Been replaced with TMP-B that we know was approved for 496, but if we round up, it's 596 trips, right?
Correct.
Before we break that. But part of that TMP-B was calling for traffic counts for mitigation at 25, 50, 75%. So those are physical counts. We're no longer
Correct.
using the book to try to calculate mathematically. We're sending somebody out there and they're actually doing counts.
Right.
So
To look
when,
for things like traffic signal warrants and things where you're looking at not just the trips from the development, but you're also assessing the trips, say, on Route 1. So you're looking at not just the development's trips, but current conditions out on Route 1.
but during that count, when we're looking at the trips that are coming out of the development and they're counting, when that data is collected for, TMP2 build out at 75%, are they looking at the total number of trips and then going, oh, well, we have this cache back here from TMP1 that there's 200 trips that we need to delete. So those are all cumulatively added up and count towards the TMP that's current. TMP
Right, it's based on
right.
physical counts. So the monitoring counts to see if a traffic signal is warranted is based upon physical counts that are done. It's done at the 50% occupancy according to the scorecard, but it's
Correct.
based on what's out there. And it's everything that's out there. So you are in effect counting the 2008 TMP trips because they're physically out there and you're counting them.
So even though the applicant got a TMP-B, the second one, and is 596 trips, there is inflow that is being recounted.
Correct.
And so even though he thought he was getting 596 trips in his TMP, some of that's being undermined.
Just in
because
terms of mitigation.
In terms of mitigation.
In terms of potential mitigation.
But I think what we're all struggling with is how are these numbers being counted, and then how is it applied? And
There's no application. I mean, it's strictly when they go out and do their 50% monitoring counts. Are they scheduled?
I'd be happy to try to provide some additional clarification.
You think you're going to be?
No, I don't know. Once again, my apologies. I'm not sure I introduced myself the first time. I think Emily kind of gave me an informal introduction, but Brad Lyon, traffic engineer with Sebago Technics. And fortunately or unfortunately, I was actually the engineer of record on this latest TMP. So let me try to start over and kind of try to explain to you guys this process and where we're headed from here. So as I think we mentioned back in 2008, that's when the first TMP for Park North was issued. Had the ropes course, some of this other development that was scoped out. As part of this latest TMP that we pursued, that was issued in 2020, those trips were grandfathered, which is why you don't see that development on this TMP. As I'm sure many of you know, when we go through this TMP process, the mitigation that's listed in the TMP is a result of the background traffic that we count. So in this case, we did our study in 2019. Thankfully, it was pre-pandemic. And then we superimpose this build out as best we can tell on top of that. So although you don't see like the ropes course on this TMP, when we're evaluating the mitigation, that traffic was on the roadway network when we performed our traffic impact study. So the purpose of this scorecard moving forward is to serve two purposes. Purpose number one is to literally, as development occurs, see where we stand with those permitted trip thresholds. So once again, in the traffic movement permit for the AM, PM, and Saturday peak hours respectively, we have in our permit 496, 492, and 357. Per the main DOT rules and regulations, as Diane, I think, previously mentioned, we're allotted an additional 100 trips before we need to pursue a TMP amendment. So basically, when we go over that threshold, all development needs to stop till we get the updated TMP. The one part that I think there's some confusion on is these counts that we're expected to do at these various percent occupancies. The reason for that is DOT does not want to put a physical traffic signal in at an intersection unless it's certain that it meets warrants. So when we go through this study, obviously with this projected build out of 5 to 7 years, there's a lot of assumptions at place. And as I hope you guys know, the IT trip generation manual doesn't exactly account for the traffic that's on the roadway network. So what we're doing is we're tracking when we need a TMP amendment. That's all based on the IT trip generation calculations. The counts have nothing to do as to whether we need an amendment or not. All we're doing is, as development occurs, working with your traffic peer reviewer, going through the IT trip generation calculations, and then updating this scorecard to see where we're at with that threshold. Secondary to that, there is a condition in the traffic movement permit for a traffic signal at the intersection of Route 1 and Waterfall Drive. Physical counts need to be conducted at 50, 75, and 100% occupancy of the permit to determine, based on actual volumes, if a traffic signal needs to be installed. All other mitigation listed in this TMP has been conducted to date. We've even gone as far as at the intersection of Waterfall and Route 1 to put in the underground conduit. Should a signal be warranted, we can put up the infrastructure and not break ground again on Route 1. So these percent occupancy levels literally just determine when we need to go out there and count. The complication with this, and I think Sean mentioned this at the previous meeting, DOT doesn't just let us count whenever. We cannot do traffic counts in the winter. So for this type of roadway, the count window is from June 24th to August 1st. So obviously, outside of that window, there's been some additional development that has occurred, such that we now need to do a traffic count, which we have scheduled for June 25th, a 12-hour count from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., because as Diane noted, we have exceeded that 50% occupancy threshold. It gets a little complicated because now that the Aroma Joe's has been improved, when that gets occupied, given the traffic associated with Aroma Joe's, we're literally going to go from that 50% occupancy level, as we said here with the trips here, we're going to now go to 100%. So we're, given the intensity of development with the Aroma Joe's, we're going from 50 to 100. So depending when Aroma Joe's actually opens for business, if it's within this count window and it doesn't meet warrants when we do the count on June 25th, we would then do a second count. If the Aroma Joe's opens after August 31st, we would not be able to do our count till the following year. So I don't know if I confused it more or provided additional clarification, but there's two separate things here. The IT trip generation calculations are just solely to determine where are we at before we need an amendment of the permit. And then the traffic counts are driven by percent occupancy, which tells us whether we need a traffic signal at the intersection of Waterfall Drive and Route 1. Does that answer your question or provide further clarity?
Yes, this explanation does help, because that was one of the things that I was wrestling with here, is that we've talked about the 50%, the 75%, but the numbers we're looking at here, the 107, so that explains it further, that the numbers we're looking at here projected, we have the pending approval from the scorecard here, and then we have the items under construction. So that does add clarity.
Yeah, it's probably a little confusing to have the percent occupied tied to this scorecard, because it doesn't make sense for us to do the counts until the traffic's actually being realized. So we're tracking this against the permit, but like, for instance, the Aroma Joe's, and if the 90 apartments move forward, as I said, we're going to be from 50 to 100%, but we wouldn't actually count that till the traffic's on the roadway and the apartments are open and the Aroma Joe's is open. But again, the big point for you guys to understand is we certainly have exceeded that 50% occupancy level due to the Ziggies. So we do have our count scheduled for June 25th for that signal warrant. If the counts meet the thresholds for a traffic signal, these future occupancy numbers don't matter. The signal will be going in. Then we're just tracking whether we need a TMP amendment or not at that point.
So I think that's at least for me, I think that's probably what the board is struggling with as well, is that we have a TMP.
Yep.
It's based on some hypotheticals and some concepts of what's going to go in there and sizes of the mixed uses. And then we have occupied conditions, structures, lots. We have pieces that are under construction, pieces that are pending approval. But the order of counting it and when we see the counting and when it's relevant, I think that's the confusing part, because I think in reality we know it's going to happen, so it's just a matter of when. So like you said, so we, based on these numbers, we know we're going to be at 100%. It's going to trip the warrant at some time or the mitigation at some point, but it may not until next year, based on when they open and based on when you're allowed to do a count.
Yeah.
So it's sort of one of those, I think for me, it's reactive instead of proactive, and I think that's the part that I wrestle with, is that we can't fix it until it's broken kind of thing, and seeing like we can see it's going to be a problem, but we can't do anything about it until it's a problem, I think. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, respectfully, I would challenge that a little bit. I mean, again, we're tracking the traffic numbers based on ITE, but I can tell you, and Diane knows this as well, I mean, the last thing that the DOT wants is to put up a signal that doesn't meet warrants. You can actually introduce increased safety concerns if you do that. So that's why DOT put this condition in the permit. And so those triggers are driven by that percent occupancy. It's just complicated by the fact from a timing issue, when we can count versus when buildings are occupied. We can't necessarily restrict occupancy between that count window. Sure. So I think Ziggy's was operational. I think they opened up March of this year, if memory serves me right. So if we didn't have a count window, we would have counted that right after March, April sometime. But we do have to delay until that peak summer time to do the counts.
Sure.
The results of those counts and where we end up, I actually don't know what will, if we'll meet a signal or not. The trip thresholds, or the traffic thresholds is probably the better term, coming out of Waterfall Drive to need a traffic signal are actually pretty high. You're looking at, you need probably around 80 left turns over 4 hours in a day coming out of Waterfall Drive to meet a signal warrant. And that's DOT's concern, as we're going off all these assumptions. They don't want to just throw a traffic signal up day one. So we've tried to be as proactive as we can, to support your first point. When we did the widening on Route 1, to try to get that infrastructure in place such we can get if we know we meet warrants, we can get a signal up as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the big thing is the timing of actual occupancy and traffic being realized on the roadway network, combined with the acceptable count window for Route 1.
Yeah.
And I know there's a few moving pieces here, so I can appreciate it's confusing.
Yeah, and the board, I know the board members are very familiar with, there's a traffic light at the bottom of Saco Island that's been there forever and not working. And then just recently, we have, within a few hundred yards, we have 2 new lights that are now working. So that, I don't think anyone here envies the traffic engineers here. That it's very confusing to us, but.
Tag me in. Or tag
So,
me out, I should say.
yeah. So Saco Island, just so you know, that's a perfect case of a traffic signal that went in and was not warranted. So DOT will not let you turn it on until it's warranted.
Sure.
So it was put in specifically on flash, and it can't be made active until you have those traffic volume warrants.
Yeah.
Which they don't like to happen, and that's why, in this case, they're doing monitoring counts to see if they actually meet a warrant.
Sure. So then, one last hypothetical. So the old site of the ropes course there, Monkey Trunks, I think it was. So what happens when that site has a new tenant and wants to be developed? How does that come into play with, it's just a hypothetical, but to understand how that works.
Whether or not it's over 10 years old, I would think. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'd want to assess if the new use was more trips or fewer trips, and probably adjust your scorecard. But in this case, we're not tracking that one anymore. So unless it was a significantly different use and was probably more than 100 trips different, you probably wouldn't do anything about it.
Okay. Thank you. Is that more clarity for the board? Hopefully.
If I can, Mr. Chair, too, I just want to make sure that we're aware that there was mitigation completed. So Brad could, or Elliot's team could speak about that. Hancock Lumber has done some improvements toward this traffic movement permit as well. So it's not like it's set it and forget it. There's stuff happening out there. We just don't always, we're not always coming in and reporting it to you, but our city engineer has been working diligently with some folks from Sebago Technics and Hancock Lumber to get some of that work done as well. So if you wanted more info on that, I'm sure they could provide it. But the traffic movement permit is for all of Cascade and Park North, so I just don't want to lose sight that items have been completed toward the mitigation.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we understand that for sure. There's a lot happening. It's over a long time frame. It's just trying to understand how it's all intertwined together. But no, that's good. Thank you. We appreciate that. Jeff?
I don't want to get sidetracked, but it's all part of the same arterial road, right? So when we look at this, we're talking about 90 units in an area that has a TMP, and at the previous meeting, we're looking at across the street 130 units. But the TMP is the Waterfall Drive, Route 1 connection point, right? We're not really worried about the entirety of Route 1 in that. It's a separate developer. It's volume, but it's, I guess the question, you know, we're talking about counts all the time, but we're only, like, we're kind of doing it through a magnifying glass, and I don't know how it's fair to the developers, and we have to only let them count what they're counting, but as a board, I guess we have to be thinking about the holistic picture, is there's only Route 1, there's no path around it, and all of this traffic is funneling onto it, whether it be part of the TMP that they're counting much closer, or whatever, you know, our neighboring towns approve in their town, it's going to funnel on that. So I guess it's a very big picture, and
It is.
and, you know, I struggle with, you know, it's an area, it's a targeted growth area in our comprehensive plan, but, you know, where do we have responsible growth? Where do we kind of throttle that back? And no offense to the engineering world, but, you know, I come from a very physical science world. We have a prediction, a calculation, we build it, we test it, it's right down, it's immediate. This, they're trying to predict stuff that takes a long time to be built out. There's a lot of other variables that are outside the scope of their examination window. And just the time it takes to get the infrastructure built. And, you know, I think of the Jenkins Road 112 one right now. It's like, how is that going to work? Because at 5 o'clock, it's already backing up over the overpass, and we're going to have these ramps. But there's just a lot of data that they're trying to put in. I mean, very technical data, and then behavioral data, and there's exact science. And so I guess when we look at this issue as a board, when do we kind of say, okay, let's maybe throttle this back and give them time? Because I assume your industry does not track your projections, that we projected X number of a certain performance, and there are times that we say we will put a signal in. By the time the signal goes in, the intersection still falls level of service below C or D. Do they have a success rate tracking on their predictions? I don't know if that exists in your industry, but if you go to your cardiologist and say, how many of these procedures have you done in patients that didn't live, you know? I just think there's a lot of data here. There's a lot we're asking. We have very professional people giving their opinions, but as a board, we're trying to take the very big look of how do we make it best for all the citizens of Saco. So, and I think we're all having these thoughts, and I guess that's my thought on traffic as a whole. There's a lot of pieces to it. So.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from board members real quick? Elliot?
Can I add just a couple of quick points to that?
Yes.
And Jeff's right, it can get really confusing, and Brad and I have had many conversations that I scratch my head sometimes. A couple of things. I think you were referring to Carey's project, I believe his was under 100 trips, so he never had to get a TMP. If all development happened that was always under 100 trips, you're right, it's difficult to track until somebody, in this case like myself, comes in and does a project that does need a TMP. They make us look at what's everything that's going on that road today, everything that's been built, and they make us look at, is anything being approved in this case, Scarborough or in Saco, that would add to that that's already on the planning board agenda and we know is coming forward. They would make us count that as if it was already happening. So when we went from our first TMP to our second TMP, the first one looked at the traffic that was existing in 07 and 08. We built a few items out there. We added to the traffic. General development in the area added to the traffic. So when we went to our second TMP, we now had to develop a new base. So yes, they were grandfathered, but they get counted into the mix of all the development that has happened that impacts, in our case, Route 1. What does now the base look like? Maybe it went from 18,000 cars a day to 20,000 cars a day, to use a simple reference. 2, they make us always use the ITE manual. I can tell you, Brad and I have had many of arguments about when we do these mixed-use projects, the ITE, I personally don't think it is kept up with what's going on in the world, that when you have these mixed-use projects, you get a lot of passerby traffic, and you get a lot of internal traffic that use those services. DOT doesn't let us do that. They look at each individual business, use that ITE average across the country to say, we think that bank is going to develop 50 trips a day. In reality, it might only be 30, but they make us use 50. So you don't quite get the growth when you have these mixed-use projects that we end up doing that on paper you think you're going to have. We don't end up with that. In the fact that the trips don't, if we need another amendment, and it looks like we're going to, Brad will have to go do a study from scratch again, not look at what was there in '07, not look at what was there in 19, but what's there in this case, maybe 24 or 25, and start all over again and say, now there's this many cars on the road, and we now have to do that best guess as, okay, now we have 10 lots left. What are we going to do in those 10 lots? Then you start that count all over again as to, we guessed we were going to develop another 500 trips, and as we develop things, they start a new scorecard. But we don't have to get there until the current scorecard reaches 100 trips over the current allowed trips in the current permit.
Thank you. That does help, Elliot, because we're talking about the numbers based on the ITE manual. We're hitting these trips, we're doing the studies, and that study at the 50, 75% lets us sort of kind of reset and check that against. So it adds explanation, but doesn't make it simpler, of course, but it does add some clarity.
I can, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I hear a lot about long-range planning. I think we need to, I'll work with the chair, and maybe you and I can figure out a date for our growth workshop with the long-range planning committee, because I think the other thing that we have here is in 2021, the city formed that committee for the comp plan and implementation of the vision and to answer questions like that. And I think I saw that those long-range vision questions kind of went to that committee so that this board could really focus on development reviews. And so I think that it's hard sometimes or difficult when you see that, you know, you still have that feeling to be the vision committee because you had so much on your plate previously. But maybe if we have a workshop, we can work some of this out and make sure that we all are working together and make sure that these questions, because Jeff brings up really good questions, are addressed. And, you know, maybe there's some work that the committee can help you on.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Yeah, and it's just because it's such a large zone, it's a significant quarter, it's revisions, it's not one TMP for one specific area, it's just the whole area is evolving, so that's sort of, we don't really have anything like that in the city, so that's why the questions, I suspect. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But I mean, I think it's important if we have this joint vision, right, this visioning, but we're of a board of implementation and evaluation. And, you know, the applicant brings up a very good point. Here you have a situation where they are going through the process and they're doing a larger development that's required to have this permit. And it's proven that it takes a long time to get all these things worked out, right? He's got applications, he's built out, and he's doing it. He kind of has this area that they're watching, but all these others can sneak under the radar in our growth zone, right? So as a board, we're being tasked, hey, this is still the growth zone, approve it. And, you know, he's kind of the zone out there. Do we have some sort of a standard that says if there's an area with a TMP, there's a buffer of protection around him? It almost feels like isolation, but that applicant has moved in and is trying to develop a larger scale without these little players, but little applicants that are flying through without needing traffic counts. There's got to be some way that we can not just have a long-range vision on the wall, and, you know, those who are trying to do it the right way and get it all mapped out and have significant investment, and a lot of little ones are kind of just piggybacking on the opportunity because the city's long-range vision that's our new growth zone. And I mean, at the end of the day, our questions are about long-range performance, I just don't know how to be equal to everyone. That people that want to develop on a small scale, the people that are truly invested in investing all this time and energy to do these counts and permits and get it built out. There's got to be some level of fairness if they're spending all of this money and infrastructure and build out, that they're held at a certain point, but then to kind of protect our growth of the city at a reasonable rate in that area. How do we offer some sort of a buffer zone to a TMP holder? I guess is part of my question, because it doesn't really feel fair to the applicants that are coming before us, as we're all saying there's a traffic problem. Yes, we know there's a traffic problem, but how do we evaluate that? And I just think that if we're going to do, and I'm in support of a long-range joint conversation, but I think there could be more involved with, council maybe offering some sort of an ordinance that would allow either some protection for the people who hold the traffic moving permit, so that there isn't a lot of additional growth that we can't monitor on a closer scale. I'm hearing a lot of this other numbers is my concern, and I just think it's important that we have more than just a long-range plan, but something to try to protect the levels and rate of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's a little bit of a gray area. I think there's some provisions in our ordinance that allows us to ask more questions and require some things. If you're not quite at a TMP level, we can ask for a few little studies. So it just might be on the board's shoulders to help mitigate some of that based on the development in the area. So,
Mr. Chair, I may be looking at this much more simply, but I guess I'm not as troubled by the fact that, a bigger development might be asked to apply and get this TMP for its project, whereas smaller ones might not be required to get it, because I think the state is setting up a series of estimates and guesses as to when traffic signals might be needed in a certain location on a certain road. And so there's a convenient way of having the signal put in by someone other than the city if the project's big enough, so that project is burdened with that cost. Now, maybe that seems unfair, but I'm not offended by that, because I think that happens all the time in a variety of areas in our life, where the bigger projects end up sometimes carrying the smaller projects. And as for other projects on Route 1, I don't know that we need buffer zones or anything. It seems to me that, there's a lot of land on Route 1. It's going to be developed. There'll probably be a traffic light at Waterfall Drive. Who knows, there may be another traffic light someplace else on Route 1 as more development goes in. And this TMP is one way of monitoring when a traffic light needs to go in. But like the Jenkins Road, there's an example of, I assume they figured out a traffic light was needed after you have a dozen cars backed up on the Jenkins Road. They couldn't get out onto 112. And someone finally gets the idea that I ought to put a traffic light in there. So this is a mechanism to go and determine when traffic lights go in. But I think we have to be very careful about, and I guess we'll see what the long-range planning committee comes up with, but be very careful about limiting growth to protect larger developers. And I have nothing but respect for, this project and all the work that's gone into it. But I'm not sure that we need to really go further than that. I don't think we need to try to place burdens on others that the state, a burden that the state's already put on this developer. That's all.
Thank you, Jim. Continuing, we have a few updates, I believe, and Sean, do you want to go over a few of those updates or responses to a few comments?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. I think besides traffic, I think one of the main issues we brought up was the engineering review comments provided by the Public Works and the city engineer, that we did respond and revise the plans accordingly. in accordance with those review comments and resubmitted that. I think it's that time of year, so I don't think we've received anything back from Joe at this point in time, but certainly I'm more than comfortable, obviously, addressing any final comments that the engineering review may have. Aside from that, I think the last thing we were waiting for was an update to our NRPA permit. As you recall, there was a discussion earlier with the peer reviewer for the city in terms of the actual wetland delineation, which was updated, agreed to by both parties, and that permit is at the DEP and Army Corps now and just waiting for their final resolution. Aside from that, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I have anything else to add, but certainly be happy to answer any questions the board has. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So as a reminder to the board, at our last meeting on May 28th, we held a public hearing. We opened that public hearing and continued it to this evening. It hasn't been reopened or closed. And as Mr. Frank mentioned, they responded to DPW comments, city engineers review. He's still to review those final responses, and I'm waiting to hear back on the NRPA comments as well. Any questions or concerns from board members based on any of these responses or updated material? And if not, Jeff?
I think I had read a lot of the fall restraint, the fall protection was eliminated. You were able to change the design. Mr. Lervier's notes.
Yes, we did work with the engineer on that. Basically, we regraded, if you will. It's right along the property line between us and the pond that's already out there. And what we basically did was just provide a little room, regrade that area right in through there, if you will, so that we have a smaller wall within that area, which obviously from the applicant standpoint is less of an expense, and at the same time did eliminate a lot of that fall protection as required.
Okay. The second question I had was on the wet pond capacity. You had a really good chart in there, but it was a little bit tough to understand the acreage that it was designed for and what was being served and being proposed. It's like I couldn't get them to add up, and I was just wondering if you could.
There is a map that was part of the plan set. That hopefully I could direct you to. Page sheet 12. Which, if you have that in your package, there's 3 tables there. And the final table says existing stormwater treatment wetland pond number 6. It contains design capacity, current development, and capacity remaining within the table.
Yes. I apologize. I'm still struggling with the new layout.
No.
Of our packets. So, yeah, when I was looking at the bottom table, existing stormwater treatment for wet pond number 6, if we just stay within pervious area, your design capacity was 13.14 acres. Currently developed area it's serving, I assume, is 8.65.
Yes.
And then we have a balance of 4.49.
Correct.
Now, I'm trying to figure out, the top table is talking about the existing developed area contributing to wet pond 6 for impervious area is 5.56. So am I to take that 5.56, and is the bottom table's current developed area, is that including the proposed development?
That's exactly correct.
Okay, so that means that the bottom table is showing everything that's currently built plus your proposed development, which will mean that we still have capacity of 4.49 acres.
Absolutely correct. And if that wasn't clear on the tables, then I certainly apologize.
No, I think it was me just trying to make heads or tails of everything.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you added this in, because that was one of the questions that I had, was how much capacity do we have left on these?
That's right, Jeff, you
ponds?
did, and I'm sorry I didn't specifically mention that. You did specifically ask that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for the applicant from board members? Jeff?
I did have a final question on design criteria. We had talked about the elevations above the garages, the sidewalls, and if we had any changes to break up the very long wall profiles.
No, we haven't changed that. Like I said, that wall is only about 5 feet tall on the side wall, the rear wall of that one garage that faces Waterfall Drive. And then there's quite a bit of slope elevation change down to Waterfall. We've talked about adding landscaping in that area to break up basically the view, so it's not a direct view as you're going down Waterfall. Two, obviously, the buildings behind it are 3 stories tall, so you'll see, we think you'll have basically a view right over that building, and there's, with the landscaping, we're hoping to make it basically just disappear. We don't want to almost attract a look to that building. We want it to disappear. So we're talking about adding different types of landscaping on the back of that building.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. If there are no other board member comments or questions, perhaps it's appropriate to reopen the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I move to reopen the public hearing.
Thank you, Jeff, for the motion.
Second.
Second by Jim, thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion to reopen the public hearing? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to reopen the public hearing. If there are any members of the public here this evening that would like to speak on this item, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, since there's a little more information that the applicant needs to get to the city and the city needs to review, would it make sense to move to continue the public hearing to the next available hearing date so we can have all those questions answered?
I guess that's up for board discussion.
Well, I'll make that motion to continue the public hearing to the next available meeting date.
Thank you for the motion, Jim. Motion made to continue the public hearing to the next available meeting.
I'll second.
Motion made and second to continue the public hearing to the next meeting. Jeff?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for discussion, I'd like to know what particular items that we feel like are needed to be submitted to the city for further clarification.
Well, I had understood that the city engineer needed to review some of the information that the applicant had provided, but the city engineer hadn't gotten back to you yet. Is that right? And wasn't there some additional information about the stormwater drainage system? Or is that all resolved now? It is? All right. So perhaps it's just the city engineer?
It was the city engineer just reviewing the last plan set, and I believe the traffic peer review comments have all been addressed. So what we could do is draft findings of fact and conditions for the next meeting, just like with Thornton, if the board wanted. And we also are waiting on the DEP and NERPA approvals, but there will be, in order to cut the lot, there will be a final subdivision review, and the applicant is required to give you those approvals on the final subdivision review.
So are we saying that we either have now all the information we need, or we will by the next meeting date?
By the next meeting date, you would have enough information, I believe, to do your review with some conditions, if that's how you want it to go.
All right, well, if that's the case, then I'll withdraw my motion to continue the public hearing, because there's no need to do that. If Carrie Lynn will withdraw her second.
I withdraw.
And go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I guess I didn't realize the NERPA, the other permits haven't been issued yet, so we may not want to close until those permits are in. So I think maybe your original motion, I missed that detail, so maybe your original motion to continue or to table is more appropriate until, because if we can't complete the subdivision, then we can't move forward. So I think let's not set a timeline by closing the public hearing at this point. So.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, if I can just clarify, so
Yeah.
there'll be a whole separate application for final subdivision review that the applicant will have to bring forward. So at the last meeting, I believe it was, the board issued preliminary subdivision review for the lot itself. So the applicant has to bring forward their DEP and NERPA approvals in order to finally cut the lot. So they have preliminary subdivision right now for the subdivision amendment.
So there are the few pieces to this law.
Yeah.
We reviewed it and forwarded a positive recommendation for preliminary subdivision approval. Now, right now, we're looking at it, and that was for the lot split.
Yep.
And then here we have site plan review and site location for the use, the buildings, the structures. And then the final DEP and the NRPA permit, that's coming as part of the final subdivision.
Yeah, that's how you can do it, and that's fine.
So, as part, if the board would like, we could add a condition of approval discussing the final DEP and NRPA permits if we'd like. Jeff, I believe you're alluding to the time frame of our 30 days of a determination once we close the public hearing. Sean, is there a time frame on receiving input from DEP or NRPA or anything? Is it?
That's one I wouldn't want to guarantee in anything, Mr. Chairman. They have it. I think it's probably just more of staff time in terms of actually preparing the permit. I'll be happy to follow up, but certainly we're hopeful it'll be in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you.
DEP has some new permit writers, so the timelines have been taking longer than they did in the past. So I just want you to know that as a board, it's not anything the applicant did. It's just permits are taking longer right now as the new DEP staff gets onboarded.
I guess where I see this, as far as the public hearing goes, I know there's the time frame. We haven't had much public input. I'm not concerned about that if we make it a condition of approval. If the board would like, we could, I don't know, I don't think it's necessary to look for, close a public hearing and ask for continuation on the applicant, that it's a piece out of their control, but the city review, or excuse me, the city engineer reviews those permits as well. So I personally think we could close the public hearing this evening. And then, Emily, when's the July 2nd? If we see the applicant again, July 2nd?
So we would have July 2nd, we would bring you draft findings and draft conditions, just like with the Thornton project you just looked at.
And we would have some sort of update from the applicant, whether they have the permit or they're still waiting on it at
Yeah.
that time.
I'm sure we could ask the applicant to do that.
And then if the board wishes at that time, we could make a determination if we need to continue, if we're not ready to make a determination. So again, we still have the option, we can close the public hearing, we can make a finding on the application, we can close the public hearing, we can continue the application, we enact that 30 days. I think there's a few courses of action that the board can take this evening.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess I might have misunderstood earlier. So if we do close the public hearing instead of keeping it open, and we can issue findings of fact and conditions of approval at our next meeting, but one of those conditions could be the final subdivision approval, right? Is that how that works?
The applicant will need final subdivision approval no matter what you do.
Okay.
But you can condition, you can condition that we receive copies of the DEP and Army Corps approvals.
Well, then it doesn't make any sense to keep the public hearing open. So, I had made a motion to continue the public hearing. I'm withdrawing that motion now, and if Carrie Lynn withdraws her second.
We did,
You already did? All right, then I'll move to close the public hearing, Mr. Chair.
I will second closing that public hearing.
Okay. Motion made and second to close the public hearing. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
I vote yes. Motion passes 4-1 to close the public hearing. So with that, are there any other items to this application that the board is looking for resolution on above and beyond the DEP and NRPA permits and the city engineer reviewing the applicant's responses to his comments? We heard from traffic peer reviewer and the applicant's traffic engineer. I believe there's clarity on the TMP and direction on that. So as mentioned, we can continue the public hearing to our next meeting, July 2nd, and review draft findings of fact and draft conditions of approval, if the board would like, or we could.
Mr. Chair, didn't we just vote to close the public hearing?
Yeah, sorry, did I say public hearing?
Keep it open.
Sorry.
Yep.
Let me go back. It's not that late, is it? Lost my train of thought here. We can continue the application, we'll continue the application if the board would like to the July 2nd meeting and review draft findings of fact and draft conditions of approval if we'd like. Or we can make a determination now and then still review draft findings of fact and conditions of approval.
Mr. Chair, since I think it makes sense to do the final approval with the findings of fact and conditions of approval, so I'll move to continue hearing on this application to the July 2nd meeting date.
All right, thank you, Jim, for the motion. So Jim's made a motion to continue application review to July 2nd. Did I capture that correctly? Yes. Okay, thank you.
I believe I can still second that. I can second that.
Yes. Second by Carrie Lynn. Any discussion regarding continuing the application to the July 2nd meeting? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to continue to July 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We'll see you on the 2nd.
All right, continuing along here, unless the board would like a short recess? Yes? We'll do a short 5-minute recess, please. All right, thank you, everyone. We will continue with our agenda this evening for item 5D, which is Saco Island East. This is map 37, lot 6, and this is an amendment request provided by Goral Palmer as the applicant's representative. This evening, we have an application of completeness review for site plan amendment for off-site sidewalk and on-site features, as outlined in our application materials. Emily, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. So I want to go over a couple of things on this. We drive by this project pretty frequently, if you're like me, so you know that it's under construction. Structures are up, and during the last year, the applicant came and did an extension request and then transferred the approval name, so you kind of saw some info from us on it last year. And then the applicants recently requested a couple of amendments. Probably the biggest amendment came before the staff, where the applicant was in the process of designing the off-site sidewalk that was required as part of the planning board condition of approval. We gave you the condition number 22 wording here. And that sidewalk design required a retaining wall and some other drainage considerations. So it was a little bit more than just to show a sidewalk on a piece of paper. So in spring of 2024, we had come to you with the Downtown Gateway Concept Plan. We provided a link to that. I don't know if you remember, this was in March. I don't think Carrie Lynn was here yet, but we have the link there. I could pull it up if we would like. So that Downtown Gateway Concept Plan included a coordinated traffic signal system between Pepperell Square and South Street in Biddeford, pedestrian crossing to bring pedestrians across Main Street from Saco Island, a road diet to narrow vehicle lanes to 11 feet, elimination of the existing southbound right turn lane, bike lanes on either side of Main Street, and then also median islands to help with traffic calming, a future landscaped area with updated downtown lighting to coordinate with existing lighting. And then we were really just looking to enhance the entrance into our city, and Pat Fox, our Public Works Director, came and spoke with you a little bit about that and some of that improvements on the concept plan. And so that was kind of an initiative from city staff and economic development planning, public works, and city administration. So what we did was we shared this plan with the applicant, and there were some discussions early on about the possibility of the applicant returning to you all for a site plan amendment and request a payment of an in lieu of fee instead of building the sidewalk on their side. And this in lieu fee contribution would go toward the proposed Downtown Gateway Concept Plan, so it would help beautify the whole area. Instead of constructing that off-site sidewalk. So we requested as city staff that the applicant return with a cost estimate for what this off-site sidewalk cost would have been had the applicant constructed it, and so that's where the cost estimate, that's what the cost estimate reflects in your packet. And then city engineer and public works have both reviewed it. So what the applicant is proposing is to pay an in lieu fee of $330,000 instead of constructing the off-site sidewalk. Again, that would go toward the beautification improvements in Downtown Gateway Concept Plan. And then I know it was funny because Saco Island East traffic signal came up tonight earlier. So that traffic signal, so back in 2021, there was, and I wasn't here in the approval queue, so maybe the chair could speak more about that. But back in 2021, it was unclear whether or not the signal would be able to be warranted in that location. We just had some discussions about warrants. And so what it turned out was, as part of the coordinated traffic signal system, with Biddeford, you know how we have the new traffic signals in Biddeford? It is now warranted as part of what they call a coordinated traffic signal. So what the applicant is doing to fulfill the original conditions of the approval is they're going to be paying $219,000 to the construction of the coordinated traffic signal install. I just want to be clear that that $219,000 fee does not require any type of amendment because it just follows the language of the condition number 23. So total, this applicant would be paying about $550,000 contribution to the signal and also to the downtown gateway concept plan that the city would then pursue and then work through the different processes to get funding for that plan and move that plan forward. When this came up, since the applicant had to amend the site plan approval anyway, there were some retaining walls, there's some slight modifications to the units. There was a garage building they wanted to put out and some irrigation systems. So I said, why don't you just package it all up into one item in front of the board? So that's kind of these other things that you see here as part of that amendment application. So that was a long introduction. Be happy to answer any questions, but I just want to give you the background of how we got here. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Board members, any questions for Emily at this time? Jeff?
So just to be clear, you directed, even though some of those could have been a minor site plan amendment, you could have handled the staff level. You've opted to, because there were so many of them, to send the entire package here to us tonight?
Yes.
Thank you.
Emily, do we have the applicant here this evening for a presentation?
Yes. And also pull up the downtown gateway plan.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to add anything to that?
My name is Ted Moore, and I am the developer at Saco Island East, Saco Riverside. We started with renovating the building across the street at 110 Main Street, where Social Security is. I bought that 5 or 6 years ago, and we added 31 apartments at the back of Unit 91, which are all occupied at this point. And now we're involved with building 24 townhouses in 12 buildings at Saco Riverside, and you can see the plan on the screen next to you. The 3 small changes or minor amendments that we'd like to present a request of the planning board are approximately 10 by 10 square foot mail building. A building would have some stone around it, so when you drove in on your left, there would be a 10 by 10 structure where all the mailboxes and packages would be delivered. So the mailman didn't have to stand out in the rain or the snow sorting mail into the, those boxes that stand up in the ground, because they won't, as you know, they don't deliver to houses anymore. You have to have a centralized place. And then down the hill from there, there's a pad and about a 6 by 8 foot structure, which holds the common electrical meters for the sprinkler system, holds the sprinkler system controls. It's like a little garden shed, but it wasn't. There was a pad there for that, and we didn't have it. We can't put the meters on the pad. We need to put them on a pole or a structure. So, and then as you look at the site, when you drive in on your left, we felt that the first 2 buildings on the right were sort of out there by themselves and not really incorporated into the vernacular of the overall development. So we are proposing a 3-car garage, which is a small building you can see. Again, I don't know if you can see it, I can't point to it, but that's a architecturally cute building that I've built 20 or more times in Massachusetts to hide cars. And the reason for it is we wanted it to help the entrance feel when you get to the project, but also we've already had potential customers asking about extra parking. So we thought it would be useful from that point of view also.
All right, thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant on any of the material we have before us? Again, this evening, this is a application for completeness review and scheduling a public hearing. I believe this would be on the July 16th agenda currently. Jeff?
So, Mr. Chair, I just would like to ask a little clarification. Behind the three-car garage that's proposed, just to the south of that, there's a retaining wall.
There's the elevation of the three-car garage is approximately the same elevation as the building you see that it's adjacent to. But that elevation is 6 or 8 feet. As you drive in to the development, the road is low. The road is the lowest at about building 3. As you kind of drive in, you go building 1, 2, 3. Building 3, the elevation is the lowest. And the road gradually climbs up, not a very steep hill, but by the time you get up to the top, it's 8 feet or so above the entrance, the level elevation of the entrance road. So in building the garage, we don't want to have it. We want to build a small rock retaining wall that we can put landscaping on top of, so you're not looking at the foundation of a garage.
Yes, so I guess my point is that there are 2 tiers of retaining wall. Are there any provisions for fall protection?
No, those walls are not more than 42 inches tall. So they're you know, waist-high walls that have plants growing on the top of them.
So they're pictured at the top of the packet from Goral Palmer. There's a picture of retaining wall. That's the finished type.
That's a different retaining wall. That's as you drive into the property on the left. That's actually land that is owned by CMP, and that we have under a long-term lease. That it was originally approved for parking, and some previous, I think back when they were doing something with the run-of-the-mill. And so we actually hold a lease from CMP that's good for 27 more years. So that's a flat area that as you drive in from the street, the areas about the level of the entrance from Main Street, but the road is going downhill. So we had some nice pieces of granite that were found on the site. This is all granite that was there, and we thought it would be, rather than having a 2-to-1 slope or a slope that could perhaps be subject to erosion, that wall is intended just to provide a flat area at the level of Main Street when you first drive in to the access road.
So this wall here in the photograph, that's the wall that comes into the mail kiosk. And then
Yes, that's right. It stops when you get to the mail kiosk.
And then continues on the other side of the mail
Well,
kiosk.
that would be we think that might be it could be just a laid up stone wall, or it might be a wall that might be something we'd make out of granite pieces. If somebody's been on site, we've gotten from the drive-in level to the lower level with 2 or 3 levels of granite. We'd put some granite, put some loam behind it, put some more, go in 10 feet, put some more granite, sort of a stepping stone approach to get from the level of the front doors when you drive in. The lower level is above grade. They're walkout lower levels looking at the river. We're just using our native or indigenous material to beautify the site.
So I guess my concern, trying to circle back, was that I see these retaining walls and they're trying to do the stepped thing for the vision of the units, and that makes perfect sense to me architecturally. I would think on the original review, they would have viewed this entire area where the garage is as kind of just a turnaround, a dead area. It wouldn't be a lot of pedestrian traffic, but if we add a garage there, is there any concern about falling on these retaining walls? That was just kind of my first step. I mean, it looks like we're doing a 6-foot grade change in a relatively short area.
The wall that you're seeing there will be less than 4 feet tall, the wall you're looking at there. Will be, and we understand that any wall 4 feet or above, you need an engineering permit for. So we're making sure that no wall's more than 4 feet tall. You know, between now and the public hearing, we'd be happy to invite any members of the planning board to come in and look at the walls that have been constructed between the houses and get a feeling for how they look and how they work.
Yes, thank you. That would probably be a question as we continue this evening's discussion. We have been scheduling quite a few site walks, especially with the favorable weather here. So I'm following Jeff, so I guess some clarity in there in how those retaining walls work. So I'm following, I think Jeff's question is in some, on one of the sheets here, it looks like it's hard to, I think it looks like it's around 6 or so feet.
We haven't, there's a sidewalk, there's a curbing at the bottom of it, and then a sidewalk, and then some grading that will make the wall shorter.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts from board members on the application material here? One question I did have, could you, so we understand that there's some lease and there's some, with the Central Maine Power Company property, so we've got the mail kiosk there. And then, can you explain a little bit how the garage portion comes into play? Because I see the access to the garage.
Right.
The CMP, the gravel area.
The garage itself is on our land that we own. The access to park, drive into the garage and park would be across land that we lease from Central Maine Power, not land that we own. So it could be that 27 years from now, when our lease with Central Maine Power expires, there would not be, it could be that we could no longer access the garage. We could access it by foot, but we couldn't access it by car. So that could happen. I'm not, to be perfectly frank, I wonder why Central Maine Power is willing to do a 30-year lease and not sell the property. So I would hope that sometime in the next 20 years, they would decide they didn't need the property and we could own it rather than rent it.
Sure. So I guess that's understanding that in as much detail as we can, I think would be important. And Emily, it's been a while since we reviewed this project, but we have side setbacks, minimum width side yard to be determined as part of the subdivision site plan. So we don't have any side setbacks on this property, is that?
So this project originally was approved under the old zoning. So we would just need to verify and make sure we're meeting the setbacks from the originally approved plan, which we can do before the next meeting.
The garage, Emily did point out the garage was oriented slightly differently than you see there when we first submitted it to the planning staff, and they pointed out that there was a 10-foot setback, so the garage was reoriented so that it met the 10-foot setback.
Sure. I just want to triple check. And then why gravel? Sorry, going a little bit beyond the application of completeness, but
Why gravel on the CMP property?
yes.
Because I'm not certain, other than I'm not certain other than this garage, how much extra, we don't know how much extra parking might be needed. And so rather than pave it and make it impervious. We feel it's better if it can be relatively flat. We found we've got quite a fair amount of sand or gravel up there. We actually think the good, a large portion of any rainfall would be absorbed in the ground rather than having to run off on pavement.
All right, I guess for me, learning a little bit more of that overall big picture, it was great. We have the mail kiosk and the garage, and you talked about the vernacular of the whole project. And then we've got a strange portion of gravel surface, seems out of character. That's
Well, it's really, everything else is on land we own. It's part of our project. The CMP land that we lease, we have the right to pave, but we're not obligated to. And I just don't know if it turns out that everybody that lives there wants to park, 2 extra cars. I would say, well, you're gonna have to add a little bit in your condo fee so we can pay CMP, and we'll get the thing paved if we can, if we can provide for stormwater management appropriately.
I understand. Jim?
Does it, I'm just looking at the mail kiosk, it looks like that's on the CMP land too, is that right?
No, that's in our easement area. That's within our easement area. We have an easement that starts out coming in 50 feet wide, and by the time it gets to our property, it's 104 feet wide. It's kind of a weird easement, but there's lots of room there.
And that easement doesn't expire, so,
No, that's a permanent easement.
that's great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions or thoughts from board members?
Is there a chance that the board would like to do a site walk? And if so, when would be a good time for them?
I think we'll just keep going here for a minute.
Okay,
I think we will get to that, yes, thank you. So again, board members this evening, application of completeness and scheduling the public hearing for July 16th and discussion about a site walk.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to determine the application complete and move to schedule a public hearing for July 16th.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Carolyn. Any discussion on the motion? Motion made to approve the application for completeness and schedule a public hearing for July 16th. Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. As far as a site walk, how do the board members feel about a site walk on this project to look at these few areas? And I believe, as mentioned in the application here, just as a reminder, units 11 through 14 and 21 through 24 had some slight adjustments as well. I believe it's just Jeff and myself. You were with us when we reviewed this one originally. Okay. So, board members' thoughts on the site walk?
I think it's a great idea, Mr. Chairman. I saw these units as they were being built from the river when I was stuck on the ledge with my boat, and they looked very nice, but I'd like to see them up close.
So yes, it looks like the board is in favor of a site walk. Emily, do we have any potential dates available?
So Next week is a little bit tough because we already have site walks scheduled. So if we do the week after, we could accommodate July 1st or July 10th. So July 1st is a Monday, July 10th is a Wednesday.
I don't know that I need to be there, but I will be I will be on the West Coast on July 10th, but I'd be happy to be there myself in person on July 1st if you want me to be.
I think yourself or engineer.
I can have a representative, but if you'd like me, I would
Sure.
be available on the 1st and not the 10th.
Okay. Either day works for myself. Both days, board members. So do we want to try the 1st?
That works better for me.
Yes, and do you want us to schedule it for 5 o'clock?
Can we do 5:30? She knew it was coming.
Is July 1st a Monday?
It is.
Okay.
Yes. Do we have council?
Split the
that day?
difference and go 5:15?
5:15.
Yeah, thank you.
5:15 on July 1st. Great, thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'll see you on July 1st.
Could we just clarify, like, parking for that particular site walk? Are we going to be like the train station, or?
You can just park, you can just drive into the project. It's already been paved. It's user-friendly. And I think there'll be 10 driveways paved by then too, so there's tons of parking.
So we can park.
Just drive right in. Yep.
Okay.
Park on the
Great.
hot top.
Thank you. All right, continuing this evening, given the hour, I'd like to make note that we've spoken to the applicants of items 5G and 5H, which are 89 Industrial Park Road and 94 Industrial Park Road. And those items will be moved to the July 2nd Planning Board agenda. So with that, we'll move to item 5E. This is 73 Industrial Park Road, map 71, lot 1. This is a light industrial warehouse flex space presented by DM Roma. And this evening, this is an application of completeness review. And this is for a site plan proposal for the construction of a 29,000 square foot light industrial warehouse flex space for 13 units with associated site improvements, and this is in the industrial zoning district. Anything to add, Emily?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant did host a neighborhood meeting on March 12th. We have some departmental reviews here. Peer reviews have been started. We have a couple questions for the board. During this review, we also received questions about sewer. So our planning and WRD met with a concerned abutting property owner, and so we'll have follow-up on that as we move forward. So there might be some changes to the sewer connection. I'm not sure yet, but we're looking into it.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions for Emily at this time? All right, and the applicant's with us.
Good evening, Jason Haskell with DM Roma Consulting Engineers. Here with me tonight with Saco Flex LLC is Peter Lavoie, and so he'll be able to answer any questions you may have at the end. So the property is at 73 Industrial Park Road. It's a 3.6 acre property right off of the Industrial Park Road. But the interesting part is it's not part of the original industrial park that the city had approved in the 80s, 70s, 80s. I'll have to look into that. Currently, the lot is developed with all-phase electric. It's about an 8,000 square foot building with associated paved parking and driveways. The original developer of the project received site plan approval from the City Planning Board in 1997. So this is considered an amendment to that original permit. The proposal is to split the lot into two separate lots. One lot, Lot 1, being containing the all-phase electric property, and then Lot 2 will consist of the proposed flex space. And we'll be looking at 13 separate units. That'll be any of the approved uses that would be approved under the industrial park district. They will be anywhere from 4 feet with the ability for them to be combined if the tenant would prefer that. The hope is to attract new startup businesses that aren't quite ready for the large 10,000, 15,000 square foot buildings, that they'd want to set up shop there to get into the area. And then also have the overhead doors, which we're proposing for each one of the units. If you could go to the first page, please. Thank you. So these are the renderings done by Gowan and Turgeon and Dillon out of Scarborough, the architect on the project. The primary color of these buildings are the charcoal gray with color variations kind of directing you towards each one of the entrances for the building. In addition, there's also some kind of overhangs over each one of the doors, kind of directing everyone to each one of the entrances. Each building will have kind of the identical color scheme, but obviously with different door locations, things of that nature. As commented on by the planning department, the rear of the buildings did have a pretty large extent of just the charcoal gray. So what we've done is we've gone through and changed it to include a different oriented siding and a different color, kind of similar to the colors out front, but what it does is it breaks up that long gray area that was out there. In addition, we're actually including more screening trees behind it to further break it up from the abutting properties. That was one of the comments that we did receive from the Parks Department and from the landscaping peer reviewer. The site will be accessed from the existing driveway curb cut from Industrial Park Road. The site is designed to provide access for typical delivery trucks to get into the actual overhead door areas, in addition to providing space for a fire truck to turn around and in addition to an actual tractor-trailer truck. A tractor-trailer truck can make it into the property, drop off what they need to do, and then back out of that hammerhead turnaround that we had proposed next to Building 1. The site will be served by public utilities. We have received the ability to serve from Maine Water, and we're working with the city's Water Resource Recovery Department and Central Maine Power on their ability to serve. As Emily did say, that the abutter is having some type of issues with their sewer. We haven't heard back from anyone from engineering and water resources, so we're not exactly sure what is going on there or what the problem is and if our site has any effect on that. So hopefully we can get some clarification soon if it's going to be a big concern of the city. The site will require a stormwater permit because of the increase in impervious surface in addition to the city standards. So we are proposing a gravel wetland and making some improvements to the existing stormwater detention pond that's out there associated with the first phase of the project. We've also, as I said, we did receive some comments from the peer reviewer for landscaping. As kind of to address our comments, we've gone through and changed some of the species, but the The largest change is actually including more landscaping within the parking lot. We've added some landscaping beds around the area, kind of in areas that we can, that wouldn't impede in parking or the maneuverability of the trucks that need to get into the facility. So hopefully that'll address their concerns with that. And we've gone through and addressed, or at least provided responses to each one of the comments that we have received, which have been engineering. They should be in your packet. It was a good list of people. Not to mention, we have received a sign-off from the wetland peer reviewer. Which brings me to the next comment. We originally had the impression that the stormwater infrastructure that's out there that was part of the original 1997 approval has gone in disrepair for the most part, and what's happening is some of the wetland vegetation has come in, and when we had our wetland scientists go out, they looked at it, said it has some of the features of a wetland, so we delineate it as a wetland, but his understanding was because it was man-made and part of a stormwater infrastructure, that it wasn't jurisdictional to the Maine DEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Since then, we have received the Army Corps of Engineers' interpretation of their regulations on saying that because it's connected to a forested wetland and it's hydraulically connected, anything downstream of it is considered a wetland, which has been a little bit of a stretch, but that's their interpretation. So what we've looked at is what the site would impact of the existing stormwater infrastructure out there, and it's just under, I believe it was 3,000 square feet of wetland impact. So we've submitted the permit to the Army Corps of Engineers for that wetland fill, and it doesn't trigger the DEP standards for wetland mitigation or wetland permitting. So that's one permit that's out there. We have heard from Army Corps that they've changed the way they've been reviewing their permits, that they aren't going to take as long as they were before because staff constraints for the most part, and they've kind of loosened their the amount of scrutiny they put onto their employees, that they're putting more of the liability onto the actual applicants, which is understandable. So with that said, with the, we have submitted our Army Corps permits, or the permit. Hopefully we've addressed the concerns of the planning staff and the peer reviewers. But yeah, I guess I'm here to answer any of your questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Jeff?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I thought it was pretty clear from the scale, except one of the wetlands site shows the lot. It looks more inclusive. So this developed area will be just the forested area on this plan. There'll still be the remaining laydown yard that kind of goes out behind the parcel. I think it's a different, different owner.
Yes.
So we just need to be aware of some of the buffering. I just wanted to make sure that when we look at this property line as the format that Emily has up right now, that long back wall that you were referring to will have more visual impact. I just wanted to, there's an existing driveway right along that property line that's cleared.
Yep.
Do you have the limits of, you probably don't have any details on the existing vegetation along that, on the neighboring property, right, how thick that is?
The existing property owner, they actually, I don't believe they have any vegetation left on their, on that stretch. So to supplement that, we have proposed the screening trees and then made the architectural changes that we've been able to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts or questions from board members? So those trees that Jeff and Jason were just discussing, those are Black Hills spruce. I'm sure everyone's familiar with those. Those are in the 4 to 5 foot height range. You've got 14 of them along the side and then the rear of the building there. Does that sound about right, Jason?
Yes. I'm just looking that up right now. Yes, I'm sorry, yes. Yeah, they're 45 feet, spaced every 35 feet, which was the recommendation from Regina Leonard.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions from board members? What you mentioned, Jason, is pretty interesting about the stormwater pond and the wetland sort of becoming one.
It's a new one for me, too.
Yeah, can you point that out? Is that closer to the entrance of the property, or is that?
So the stormwater infrastructure is, the permitted stormwater infrastructure from 1997 through the city includes a strip of the wetland that we are crossing with the driveway coming into it.
Okay.
Thank you. That is one of the impacts, and then because that's connected to, because that drainage ditch that goes down to the pond, which is the darker, along the southern property boundary, the darker limits on the southern portion of the property, that's the stormwater pond. So the wetland to the north, which is the original forested wetland from this property, because the stormwater infrastructure is downhill of that forested wetland, they're considering all the wetlands connected, or the stormwater features, the drainage features, to be considered part of the wetland, causing it to be jurisdictional to the Army Corps of Review.
That's interesting. Yeah. It wouldn't really be a good stormwater detention pond if it were uphill. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit.
I read it a
technicality
couple
that
times.
it's Downhill. Downhill will count it. Okay. That's fun. It's a new one for us as well. A lot of good information here. Board members, any other questions, comments, concerns? Again, this evening is application for completeness, along with scheduling our public hearing on this one. And we can discuss a site walk as well, if board members would like.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes?
I think the first step is I move to approve, I move to find the application complete for 73 Industrial Park Road, site plan amendment, technically, right? Site plan amendment?
Correct.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff.
Second.
Second by Jim, thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion made to find the application complete? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0 to find the application complete.
And then we need to move to schedule a public hearing for July 16th.
Yes, does that schedule still work, Emily? Thank you.
I'll also move, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Motion by Jim and seconded by Jeff to schedule the public hearing for July 16th on this item. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. And the matter of a site walk. How does the board feel about a site walk for this item?
Is it really needed for the item of this size?
That's,
I personally don't feel it's
That's
needed.
up for
That's
discussion.
my opinion,
Sure,
so I'm just going to state that.
sure, thank you. So Matt feels unnecessary for this item in this zone and location and project? Other board members?
I'm kind of mixed. The entire industrial park is kind of all the same wetland, but with that being wetland, we probably should be, diligent and go out there and make the trek. I have concern that the design characteristics might be brought up. It's not a particularly large concern of mine, because I believe that, the industrial space, and I've said this before, I don't think we should be holding to such a high design criteria. We need space like this, and it serves a very, very unique purpose. But if that discussion is to come up, I think it'd be best if we have a site walk so we have a very good visual reference as to what type of exposure this building will have. I think you might find it's very tucked in, but I think it'd be important for us to see, so I would support a site walk.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other board member thoughts? I'm not opposed to a site walk. This one, I'm just not opposed to it. I'm up for additional discussion.
Yeah, I'm not opposed either, but I also don't know if it's as necessary as Jeff said in more residential projects.
Yeah, I'm 50/50. I don't think it holds a strong reasoning for a site walk, but I'll do one.
Emily, for July 16th, do we have any workshop items that evening?
I'm not sure yet. We may.
Okay. I guess I was thinking about suggesting that on this particular item for this day, perhaps that becomes our workshop item. 5 o'clock site walk, and then we come to the meeting at 6 here. The site's not large, it's heavily wooded. That being said, I still have to myself get here for 5 o'clock as Jeff does. Thoughts?
I'm fine.
It's easy, that location's easier to get to from Portland than downtown, so.
A little bit. So Jeff supports the site walk. Matt doesn't feel necessary for a site walk, and 3.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm 50/50, but I'd go no matter what.
Sure. Do you think we can do a site walk for that day, 5 o'clock, 16th, before the meeting?
Yeah, what we might do is maybe one of us goes to the site walk, and then the other one stays here, so in case you guys are late, then we can let people know.
Okay. Well, let's do that. Does that work, Jeff? Let's schedule a site walk for 5 o'clock. Like I said, the project's partially developed. It's wooded in the area. To get a feel for the sense, the location.
Isn't that a reason why not to do it? It is partially developed, it is wooded. It's not going to propose an impact to visually. I don't know what the visual impact is going to really be from the road because it's so far back. I just think it's a waste of time. I just need to say that again.
That's okay. That's a fair question.
If it were on the road, I would see more of a reason to go see it, but where it's so set back the way it is, and you are going to have the screening on the sides, I don't see it necessary.
All right. I see your point. I think some of the questions that Jeff had brought up, and the question about that rear lot, is that a laydown, Jason, for a rail yard, or do you know what that adjacent property is?
Yes. It's a laydown space generally for materials. Right now, a lot of it's steel, a lot of steel piles, things of that nature that are being stored by a geotechnical contractor. Then also they have tanks for pull and spring that get stored there and things like that.
So a miscellaneous laydowns.
Yeah, there's no structure out there. It's just the laydown
Sure.
space.
So that area and that access drive, based on the building location, what we see here, a lot of that vegetation is coming out. So I think that's sort of what Jeff is alluding to and taking a look at that. So 5 o'clock, July 16th. We'll meet out there briefly, and then we'll report directly here, and we'll limit for, let's say, a half-hour meeting out there.
Do you typically look for anything laid out there?
I think good effort to hit a couple building corners, and I think for building 2, I think that would be relevant here.
Yep.
Especially since it seems to be a couple flags within that forested area, I think would help immensely.
Yep.
So board members could probably walk down that access drive and really see where the buffer is. There's a lot of work to be done, but understand where those black spruces are going to go. And then proximity again to the rest of that laydown yard. So a few building corners,
Sure.
if possible.
Yep.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, our next item this evening is item 5F. Sorry, excuse me. It is 9:02 p.m. And per our standard procedures here, it looks like we have, board members, one item on our agenda left, which is 40 Buxton Road. The other items, as we mentioned, 5G and H, we've moved those to the July 2nd meeting. So if the
Mr. Chair, I move to continue to take up this new item, even though it's past 9 o'clock, for 40 in Buxton Road, given that we have a hard cutoff of 9:30.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jeff, and second, Carrie Lynn. Discussion, those in favor, Matt?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. We'll continue, thank you, board members. So this item here, 40 Buxton Road, this is map 88, lot 10. And this evening, this is an application for completeness review. And this is for the replacement of storage sheds with one 30 by 60 foot metal building. And this evening, this is presented by Haley Ward. And this is a site plan amendment, again, for a storage building, and this is at the Saco Middle School site in the West Residential Zoning District. Anything additional, Emily?
Just that the applicant had hosted a neighborhood meeting. There are a couple of waivers that are being requested, a pretty minor application. I did just want to clarify that planning staff could review something like this. We are not reviewing it because it's on City of Saco owned property. So I do not review applications for City of Saco property. So that's why it's with the board tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions from board members? All right, thank you. And the applicants with us this evening?
Good evening. Drew Olahowski with Haley Ward. Thank you for squeezing this last one in here. As Emily mentioned, this is a very minor project. Essentially, there's 4 existing sheds at the rear of the middle school property, and the facilities director is looking for just some more room for a workshop space for himself because he doesn't really have anything of that nature at the middle school currently. So we're proposing to remove those storage sheds and add that 30 by 60 prefab metal building in its place. There are no sewer or water utilities for this new building. The only change will be the electrical service. Along with the building, we are also proposing 2 new EV charger spaces right along the front of that building. So that's pretty much the purpose of upgrading that electrical service, is to supply power to those. The aisle width in front of the building will still be more than adequate for traffic circulation and bus drop-off in the area, so that shouldn't be an issue as well. Stormwater, we are not increasing any impervious area or affecting drainage patterns. As you can see from the plan, we're essentially putting that new building right where the existing sheds were and mostly on top of existing pavement, so there should be no issues with stormwater. Yeah, it's a pretty simple project. I'd be happy to take any comments or questions the board might have.
Mr. Chairman, I need to disclose that I'm a member of a Saco soccer club, and we'll receive, as a result of this, we'll receive one of the sheds from the school department for our club. So I'm going to recuse myself from being a part of this discussion because we're going to benefit from that if this is to pass.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions by board members for the applicant?
Mr. Chair?
Jim?
I just have one. I understand you're looking for a waiver for the lighting plan submission requirements. Is that because there won't be any lights on the outside of the building?
Yep, that's correct. No new lights, and we're not affecting any existing lighting.
And so that, with these storage sheds, there's no exterior lighting on those?
No,
Yeah.
those are all just temporary sheds. No power for those.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other board member questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may. I was looking over the details, and this is a corrugated, it's essentially, it does not have a permanent foundation. It's being placed on another layer of raised asphalt, correct?
So the building manufacturer will supply foundation details. The facilities director has been working with them directly, and he wasn't able to be here tonight. So I don't have the final details on the foundation.
Okay, because I think I saw it in the packet. So it's non-insulated building, workshop space, power for 2 electric vehicle chargers, but there'll be no lighting to illuminate the electric vehicle chargers on the outside. And if I recall, it's a pretty dark corner of the middle school parking lot. Okay. I guess if there are any other questions, I can do motions after. So.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, Jeff raised a good question there,
Yeah.
or a comment. So with these EV chargers, I'm just thinking someone charging up their EV vehicle, and it's December, and it's dark out back, how are they going to see where they're going? And is that going to be safe? I mean, wouldn't you need some sort of lighting out there?
I assume the existing parking lot is adequately lit, but we could take a site visit out there just to make sure there's something adequate out there as it is, and if not, we could propose a new light source in that area.
Any other board member thoughts or questions? In regards to the waivers, Jim, you mentioned a few, we talked about them briefly. I guess as far as lighting goes, I would support a waiver to provide a lighting plan and a photometric plan. However, I do share the same concerns about that area being lit. From the plans here, I don't see any concerns with property limits, neighbors, and would therefore still support a waiver for the lighting plan, the photometric plan, like I mentioned. But I think I would still support a cutoff fixture mounted on the building to illuminate that area to some degree. I don't think there's a whole lot of lighting out in that parking lot as it sits right now. So perhaps additional information, if the board agrees on lighting for that parking area in general, I think would help the board. But that's sort of, I guess those are my first thoughts in regards to that. I would support the waivers without condition, except for the lighting plan. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
I would agree. I would make a motion that we grant the waiver for the standard property boundary survey for 40 Industrial Park Road.
I'll second.
So motion made and second to grant the waiver for a standard boundary survey. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 4-0 to grant the waiver for a standard boundary survey.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I may, I think my memory serves me that there is a utility pole that is kind of tucked in the tree line to the southwest. They have it shown as an overhead utility line. I thought there was a couple of leased fixtures up there for lighting. That's the only lighting that I seem to recall in that parking lot. Maybe the applicant could verify that. Because in my opinion, that would make the EV chargers up very much on a dark, shadowy side of the building if they're there. I don't know how the board feels about granting a waiver for lighting at this point, even if we find it complete. Or we can't find it complete unless we either grant the waiver or decide. I agree there wouldn't be much impact. There's no neighbor impact if they put a full cutoff above that. But this is also a much larger structure. Near a very heavily wooded and drop-off area. I'm not sure if there should be, perimeter lighting around that structure. It's just kind of my thought. And if we do perimeter lighting all the way around, then we should probably definitely do a photometric plan for that, just to confirm. I know there's a pretty big buffer there with the utility easement coming in, but there is the is it Chantel's Way, or there's a residential subdivision on the other side. I guess
Just, Mr. Chair, just procedurally here, so we really don't have enough information to know about the lighting there. The applicant seems to think that the lighting is adequate. Would we, if we were to determine that the lighting, that they did not need any lighting there later, do we, I mean, let me rephrase that. Would we be procedurally in a bad place if we granted the lighting waiver now, and then it was later determined that, oh no, they really do need some lights out there, and they amend their proposal to include some lighting that meets the city codes?
So Jim, yes, we have done that in the past. The board has granted waivers to photometric plans, and we have then had discussions regarding lighting and required lighting fixtures and photometrics for that particular area. In a few instances, I believe the photometrics from the light manufacturer itself provided information sufficient for the board. So that is an option. We've done that before. So again, granting a waiver and then requiring specific additional information and or fixtures for this specific focused area. In the same breath, we could grant all the waivers except for this one. We can table further review to the July, would this be a July 6th meeting as well, Emily, I believe? Yes, July 16th. So we could continue the application for completeness review to July 16th, request the additional information, and have our meeting, hold a public hearing after we've found that application complete, either still granting the waiver if they're still requesting it, or at least evaluating the additional lighting information if that's what we're looking for. So does that sound about right, Emily? So two courses of action there.
So probably the safest one would be to schedule a public hearing, continue review of this application for completeness to be determined at the same time as the public hearing.
We could, yep.
Does that make sense? And at that point, the applicant can come forward with more information about lighting, and if they still need the waiver, then we can deal with it at that time. If they don't need the waiver, we'll have the application complete just for that reason. Right?
We could.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll move to continue the hearing on this application and to schedule a public hearing for July 16th.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
I would second for discussion purposes.
Motion made and discussion, motion made and second. Additional board discussion. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I don't want to cause undue delay, but, I mean, we can find this complete, but I think that there's a lot of things that are truly lacking in this design criteria that we're going to review after. This is essentially a glorified, I mean, we need to hold the city, I don't want to create undue expense, but we need to help be be fair across the board, whether it be a city project or not. But this is a glorified metal shed that's put there, that's much larger, has zero architectural features other than one walk-in door and one overhead door. It doesn't meet our criteria in multiple facets. So I have no problem finding it complete, but I think at the same time I'm going to ask those questions once the application is complete. So if we just kind of give them some advanced warning, I think we need to be fair to all applicants, whether it be city or not. This isn't any sort of permanent aesthetic structure, and I know you just, we talked about, you know, the industrial park, but this is not in the industrial park. So it's just a concern that I'm going to have later on. So with that, then we can continue.
Thank you, Jeff. I agree. I like the lighting. I'd like to know more about it. I can support receiving that lighting information either fashion, but agree as far as the application is complete. I do have the concern about a metal shed. Again, it's big. It's 30 by 60. It's pretty big. And not, additionally, not saying that a metal shed is not appropriate, but I think more information about it, I think would be appropriate. So that's my thought at this moment. Similar to Jeff's thoughts. So again, motion made and seconded for discussion to continue application review to July 16th with the request of additional lighting information specific to the application for completeness. And then we've discussed the design criteria of the shed itself. So on that motion, additional discussion? So again, so motion made and seconded to continue application for completeness review of this item to July 16th. I'm sorry, Jim, was there a scheduled public hearing?
Yes,
along with
scheduled
that?
public hearing the same day.
Thank you for the clarity. So to schedule a public hearing as well for that evening with the request of additional lighting information. Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Carrie Lynn?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
A vote yes as well. Motion passes 4-0. So additionally, in fairness, does the board find it necessary to perform a site walk for this application?
I don't think so.
No, I think if they can bring back some data to show if there is any utility-provided floodlighting, or at least floodlighting in that area, and then if they do agree that it's dark and propose a couple wall packs, like you say, the manufacturer's specification for the distribution of whatever fixture they select will be more than enough. We have 1 point on the building on each side. I think will be more than sufficient for us to make a judgment call. They don't need a full photometric plan, but just select a fixture.
Yep. I concur. And the applicant may bring back additional information on the design of the shed as well,
Okay.
potentially.
What exactly would you be looking for regarding the building design information? I believe the school department has already purchased that metal building that was provided, so I'm not really sure what else can be done at this point. I think they really just wanted this done as cheaply as possible. It's literally what you described it as, a glorified shed.
It's a huge shed.
I guess the colors, so let's say looking at the documents here provided, color, I believe, is going to be the option. Any completed images of a shed, let's say of this size, so we can understand the scale, I think would be nice and appropriate. And then we could take it from there, I suspect.
Through the chair, is it still visible from the street?
I don't believe this is visible from the street. It's quite a bit uphill and towards the back.
I think given the height, you may be able to see this one from the street, though.
It might be close.
Right. The smaller sheds probably can't see too much, but this one. I just don't want an eyesore sitting there.
I mean, at least come with some conceptual plan, I would think, of what you can do if you've already purchased it, what you're going to do to paint it, maybe some different contrasting colors, or a border, or
Arborvitae that covers up a wall.
well, I mean, it's in a parking lot, and it sounds like it's going to be put down onto another layer of asphalt. It's not even a concrete foundation, so, from what I read in the spec. So, you know, just to hold some accountability to the city for the same design standards. And we looked at the previous application. They were putting some vertical changes in color on a long wall. I mean, just offer something up that will offer visual interest to meet our criteria for design standards that we can kind of check, say, yes, you know, whether it be a blue border on the bottom or something, to mix it up a little bit and get our 25-foot rule, I think, for a wall space without some design feature. So.
Even make it so that it looks like it belongs on the property, not that it should be the next door neighbor.
Well, if I'm reading the application right, it looks like they have a dark brown roof and tan sides, right? So.
Unfortunately, I don't know what the middle school looks like. My child did not go there.
May I comment on this? Because I know I drive by this shed, this area every day, 4 times a week, maybe 5. It is visible from the road. It is in the back corner by the softball fields. There is a light post. There's a walkway that goes down to the fields. There is like a pole, a power pole that's back tucked away in that corner. I don't know if it'll provide enough light to shine on that structure. There are lights in the parking lot, but again, I don't know if it's going to hit that corner. And yeah, it is tucked away in the corner. I mean, and it is visible. That's what I'll say. So those are my comments.
Thank you. So with that, perhaps, if possible, perhaps a few night photographs might help immensely of that area. Did we capture everything on this one, Emily?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving all along in our agenda here, item 6, general correspondences. Do we have any general correspondences this evening, Emily?
No.
Thank you. Any planning department updates or discussions?
I just wanted to alert the board that we did get a copy of the request to reconsider for the DOT to reconsider its decision about Aroma Joe's. So that's going to go to the DOT. It's not a reconsideration of our decision. And what it is relative to Aroma Joe's being considered common scheme of development. So as we get more information, I'll share it on that. And then we did receive word that the Aroma Joe's approval is going to be appealed. So as more information becomes available, we will share what we need to share. But FYI. And then the planning department, we have issued approvals for 1020 Portland Road, 824 Portland Road, and 19 Millbrook Road. 19 Millbrook is a parking lot expansion that had been planned for some time. 824 Portland Road was the addition of EV charging stations at a existing car facility. 1020 Portland Road was a slight change in the site plan to allow for a utility building where parking was already planned out in the storage facility that Elliott is developing. And then I do have the Fenderson Road private road approval review that we're wrapping up this week as well. So on staff approvals, what we do is after we issue the approval, we send out letters to the abutters within 600 feet. So the list 400 feet or 800 feet. And to alert them that there's been an approval, and then that way we preserve appeal rights. So I'm just letting you know that we've closed those out.
Jeff?
So Emily, does that mean I think I heard you correctly, the Aroma Joe's approval is being basically appealed to the DOT just to see if it's still viewed as part of the entire scheme out there?
Yeah, so the request is a reconsideration for the DOT to reconsider its decision. You know, the email that we had been given as final word from DOT. So that's what the request is for DOT to reconsider their decision that they issued to me.
So whatever those findings are, is that something that, legal will kind of advise us on if that can be pulled in the future, if larger parcels can start pulling out? Can we get some feedback on that after whatever they decide?
Yeah, so it's evolving, but it was more of for your information that it's happening.
Thank you, Emily. As far as appeals go, do we have any, I'm trying to think if there have been any appeals or any follow-up or any projects that have been appealed. Do we typically get a follow-up after that, or they either?
I think we just give information as it's needed to provide it. So again, this is just FYI because I just want to be upfront with you all that what the situation is.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any planning board comments or questions, discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to thank staff, I think, and all the board. I think we're doing a much better job at putting ourselves in a well-documented position on all of our findings. I think that they're very detailed. I want to commend staff. I think they're doing a great job. And, regardless, if our decisions are appealed, that's great, but at least we're passing down very well laid out findings of facts and conclusions as to where we came up with. So, regardless of how it turns out, I think we're doing a great job, and I think we're working cohesively together. So I want to thank you all for that. It makes me proud to be a part of that. Thanks.
Yep, I agree. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, staff. All right, great. And with that, 9:33 p.m., we'll motion to adjourn.